Did you know that Agent 47 once escaped from the facility that created him, found a family in the Romanian countryside that took him in, and then had his memory chemically wiped so he would never remember that the family was murdered to cover it up? The person who remembers is Lucas Gray, but we'll come to that later. Agent 47 is the 47th clone produced in Dr. Otto Wolfgang Ortmeyer's underground genetics laboratory, and more specifically, his first complete genetic success. Before 47, Ortmeyer had produced dozens and dozens of clones across multiple series, but none reached the standard he was working toward. 47 was different. Ortmeyer saw him as the culmination of everything he'd been building toward, and gave him slightly more attention than the other specimens, raising him almost like a child, rather than accelerating him into adulthood through incubation chambers, the way he would later do with the Series 48 clones. The laboratory was concealed beneath a sanitarium in Romania, run openly as a mental institution, privately as the infrastructure for one of the most ambitious and illegal genetics programs in history. The basement levels contained the cloning equipment, artificial gestation chambers, and a long corridor of numbered subjects who were never told what they were. In the world of Assassination Trilogy, this facility is named the Institute for Human Betterment, located outside Brasov. In the original codename 47, the location is placed in Satu Mare. The number 47 is not a codename assigned after the fact. It was tattooed into his identity before he ever opened his eyes. Quite literally, the barcode on the back of his head reads 640509-040147, encoded in code 39 format. Breaking it down, 64-05-09 is his date of creation, September 5th, 1964. The second group, 040147, encodes his place in the program. 04 marks him as belonging to Series 4. 01 marks him as belonging to the first class within that series, and 47 is his sequence number within that class. IAGO Interactive chose the number deliberately. They have never pointed to any particular cultural significance behind it, and that is almost certainly the point. It is clinical. It is inventory. The whole tragedy of the character is embedded in the label before you even know his story. You give a person a name. You assign a number to equipment. The moment you hear 47 for the first time, without knowing anything else, something registers. This man was built, not born. IAGO Interactive CEO Hakan Abrak has also noted in interviews that 47 being bald was originally a technical limitation. Doing convincing hair on the lead character was beyond the engine's capabilities at the time, and that the bald head with barcode ultimately became the iconic look the franchise is built around. Agent 47's DNA is a recombinant blend, selectively chosen genetic material from 5 separate men, combined and refined across dozens of failed iterations until Ortmeyer had what he considered the optimal result. The 5 men were Dr. Otto Wolfgang Ortmeyer himself, a German geneticist born in the early 1930s, raised under the Third Reich, and later one of the most radical figures in human cloning research. He designed the entire project, bankrolled the laboratory infrastructure himself, and contributed his own DNA to the mix. His goal, stated plainly in his notes, was to create perfect assassins, physically superior, fanatically loyal, and capable of following orders without conscience. His own genetic contribution was less about narcissism and more about control. He trusted his own material, and the project was, in every sense, his. Li Hong, a Chinese crime lord who commanded the Red Dragon Triad in Hong Kong, where he had been the unquestioned ruler of the city's criminal underground since the early 1970s. 2 weeks after returning from the French Foreign Legion, he poisoned his own uncle to seize control of the triad, earning him the nickname, the Man with No Conscience. Pablo Belisario Ochoa, a Colombian drug lord who built his own cartel through the violent elimination of rivals, eventually retreating to a fortified compound deep in the Colombian rainforests. Franz Fuchs, an Austrian international terrorist born in Linz in 1929, who spent his formative years under his father's influence during the Nazi period, before fleeing to Marseille and joining the French Foreign Legion. After leaving the Legion, he formed the Fuchs Brothers, a neo-Nazi terrorist cell responsible for a string of bombings across Europe. Arkady Yegorov, known simply as Boris, a Russian Kazakh arms dealer born in Semipalatinsk in the Kazakh SSR, who developed a ferocious hatred for the Soviet regime from childhood, began stealing weapons at 15, and eventually built one of the most extensive gun trafficking networks in the world. He was the half-brother of Sergei Zavarotka, who would later drag 47 out of retirement in Silent Assassin, making Zavarotka technically 47's uncle. All 5 men served together in the same unit of the French Foreign Legion from 1950 to 1955 during the First Indochina War, the French colonial war in Vietnam, not to be confused with the later American-era Vietnam War. It was during and after that service that Ortmeyer began developing his theories about genetic recombination, watching conventional soldiers, and concluding that human beings, as they naturally exist, were simply inadequate. He shared those ideas with his comrades. They became friends, and when the time came to formalize the arrangement, the structure was straightforward. The 4 men would fund Ortmeyer's research and donate their DNA. In return, Ortmeyer would supply them with organ donors, clones grown from their own combined genetic material, biological matches whose tissue rejection risk was essentially 0. This is what kept men who were described in-game as being in their 60s, looking a decade or 2 younger than they should. The organs extended their lives. The clones who provided those organs existed for no other reason. 47 is the first successful clone. Ortmeyer's cloning program ran across multiple series before it produced anything viable. Series 1, 2, and 3 are referenced in the lore only in passing. They are described as failures, discontinued, and the subjects killed off. The details of what went wrong in those early series were never fully documented in the games. What the canon does establish is that by the time Ortmeyer reached Series 4, he had a population of functional clones for the first time, subjects who could be raised, trained, and deployed. But functional didn't mean complete. Most of the Series 4 clones who grew up alongside 47 in the asylum suffered from defects and personality disorders. By the late 1990s, the drugs Ortmeyer had introduced to suppress emotions and erase memories had proven catastrophic to the other subjects. 47 was the last one left. He was not, however, Ortmeyer's only successful clone in the absolute sense. In Silent Assassin, 47 encounters Agent 17, another Ortmeyer clone who possessed genuine assassination capability. Agent 17 was Ortmeyer's first functional assassin. What 47 represented was something beyond that, the first genetically complete success. The subject who everything Ortmeyer had been working toward actually converged. The difference between Agent 17 and Agent 47 was the difference between a prototype and the finished design. What made 47 exceptional, and what also made him dangerous, was that he was the only clone Ortmeyer ever produced who developed genuine independent thought and emotional capacity. That unpredictability was simultaneously his greatest asset and the reason Providence eventually demanded he be handed over. When Ortmeyer refused and let 47 escape instead, Providence's response was simple. Start again, produce a new batch, and this time, close the gap. The result was the number 48 series. The 48s were not a downgrade. On paper, they were designed as an upgrade, engineered with above-average combat accuracy, a significantly lower reaction to pain, increased damage resistance, and heightened speed compared to 47. What they were also engineered with, deliberately, was the total absence of free will. They followed Ortmeyer's orders without hesitation, without deviation, and without the capacity to do otherwise. They wore psychotic smiles in combat, even after fatal wounds. They were accelerated into adulthood through incubation chambers, skipping the childhood 47 had actually lived through, which meant that when 47 encountered them in the asylum's final level, they had the genetics, but none of the 30 years of real-world conditioning that made 47 what he was. That is exactly why 47 killed all of them. Hey, like and subscribe if you're into this kind of thing. No biggie if not. Anyway, Ortmeyer's goal was to produce a perfect weapon, cognitively superior, physically capable, psychologically controllable under extreme stress. He optimized for all of it. What he didn't optimize for, and what emerged in 47 anyway, was the capacity to feel. As a child inside the asylum, 47 was observed doing things the other clones didn't do. He formed attachments. He kept pets. The first was a rabbit, a runaway from the laboratory's own stock. According to the birth of the Hitman comic, it was actually Subject 6 who gave it to him, as a gesture of apology after an earlier incident between them. 47 adopted it on August 21st, 1970. He kept it alive for nearly 2 years. When it died on May 2nd, 1972, Ortmeyer himself observed 47 crying. He noted this in his records because he had never seen any of his clones do that before. 5 years later, 47 found a mouse inside the asylum. He cared for it for about a month. That one was killed deliberately by another clone as a cruel prank. The only close bond 47 formed with another person during his time at the asylum was with Subject 6, the clone who would eventually become Lucas Gray. On March 23, 1977, Subject 6 convinced 47 to run. 47 was 12 years old. They escaped the Institute together and made their way into the surrounding countryside, eventually finding a small farming community in a snowy region. An unnamed woman took them in. She fed them. She gave them somewhere to sleep. For one night, 2 children who had never known anything outside of a laboratory experienced what ordinary life felt like. They were found the next morning. They woke up to gunshots. Ortmeyer's people had tracked them overnight. By the time 47 and 6 understood what was happening, everyone in that community who had come into contact with them was already being killed. The woman was shot last, and 47 and 6 were made to watch. The decision to make 2 12-year-olds watch a woman die for the crime of giving them a bed for the night was not accidental. It was a lesson, one delivered personally on behalf of Providence, specifically by Giannis, the first constant of Providence, whose identity 47 would not recover until decades later when Gray administered the memory antidote. When they were brought back to the Institute, Ortmeyer had 47 injected with a drug specifically designed not just to erase memories, but to replace them. Real events were overwritten with fabricated ones. The blood pact, the farm, the woman's death, all of it was chemically removed. In its place, Ortmeyer installed a false memory, a version of Subject 6 who was not a brother or a friend, but a bully, someone 47 had killed in a bathroom stall at age 12. The friendship was not just taken from him, it was inverted, turned into something ugly, so that even the shape of it wouldn't feel like a loss. Gray was not there to receive the treatment. During the chaos of the recapture, he had unintentionally faked his death and slipped away. Ortmeyer's people believed he had died. He hadn't. The accident of circumstance meant Gray walked away from that farm with everything intact, every detail unaltered, and undimmed by any drug. He remembered the woman. He remembered the blood pact. He remembered 47's face as they stood there and watched her die. 47 and Gray would try again in 1989 while on assignment in Berlin, coercing a German scientist to deactivate their explosive chip implants, then returning to the asylum in an attempt to free the remaining clones. That attempt ended the same way. Gray escaped, 47 was captured, and Ortmeyer wiped his memory a second time. After the escape attempts, Ortmeyer introduced a program of drug treatment across the entire asylum population. The goal was to eliminate emotion from his remaining subjects, to strip out the quality that had made 47 difficult to manage and make everyone more compliant. He administered the serum to all of them. By 1996, the results were catastrophic. The birth of the Hitman comic documents what happened. The serums made most of the clones manically depressed. Several stopped eating, stopped drinking, and stopped responding entirely. They died of starvation, dehydration, and infected bed sores. Ortmeyer had at least 81 clones in the asylum at the time. The emotion suppression that was designed to make them better instruments made almost all of them non-functional instead. 47 survived it. Again. From the outside, this looked like total failure. Providence and the Five Fathers had been funding Ortmeyer's research for decades and had received, at most, a functional organ harvesting program and one viable assassin. Relations between Ortmeyer and everyone backing his research soured as they grew weary of funding him with little results. The doctor who had set out to produce an army of perfect killers had a basement full of corpses and one man who kept trying to leave. When 47 was 30 years old, Ortmeyer deliberately created a gap in the asylum security and let him walk out. Providence arrived the very next morning. Their constant, Arthur Edwards, told Ortmeyer he could resume operations, which was not an offer. It was a command dressed as permission. The number 48 series was produced in the window that followed. The official purpose of Ortmeyer's program was an asset who could operate anywhere, eliminate any target, and leave no traceable connection to any government or organization. That was real, but it wasn't the whole story. Before the asylum, and before Providence, Ortmeyer had tried to go through legitimate channels. He brought his theories about genetic recombination to the scientific community. The idea that directed engineering could produce a human being superior to anything natural reproduction could achieve. They rejected him. His ideas were considered radical, even insane. You can hear the fallout of that rejection every time he speaks in codename 47. He tells 47 directly, "I was ahead of my time." They shook their bony little heads, looked at me with those beady little eyes, and said I was crazy. You, my friend, are living proof that I'm not. The arrangement with the forefathers worked smoothly, until it didn't. As the project dragged across decades with mounting failures, the four partners grew impatient. They cut Ortmeyer's funding. They began pressuring him. Worse, each of them had started to want 47 for themselves, to use his creation as their own personal asset, rather than the shared program they'd agreed to. Ortmeyer's response was to file 4 contracts through the ICA, each appearing to come from a different client: Hong Kong, Colombia, Budapest, Rotterdam. The ICA didn't notice the pattern until all 4 targets were already dead. His own creation, used to kill the men whose DNA was inside him, filed through an agency that didn't know any of it was personal. Ortmeyer then filed one final contract for himself. He wanted to see if 47 could fight through the 48s. He wanted to be killed by what he had made. Before dying, he called 47 his son, possibly the only honest thing he ever said to him. The scientific community told him he was a madman. He spent 40 years proving them wrong, and the proof walked into his lab and broke his neck. Diana Burnwood was born in 1972 into a wealthy British family. When she was around 12 or 13, a Blue Seed Pharmaceuticals facility in Surrey leaked chemicals into the local water supply. Her younger brother James died from the exposure. Her parents spent years building a legal case against Blue Seed, gathering evidence, finding witnesses, working toward a lawsuit that could have destroyed the company. When they finally found a whistleblower willing to testify, Blue Seed ordered them killed with a car bomb, and Diana witnessed it all. Blue Seed was a Providence subsidiary. The people who built the bomb were a young Agent 47 and Subject 6, operating under Ortmeyer's direction. Diana would not learn that last detail until the end of Hitman 2, decades later. What she did in the years that followed was not clean or cerebral. She fell in with Savi, a female arms dealer and gang boss, and used that connection to work her way through the Blue Seed executives most directly responsible for her family's deaths. By 1998, when she was 26, she had a day job as a counselor at a mental health practice in Dublin. It was cover. Her actual work was tracking down the last name on her list, Blue Seed executive Cheryl Franklin. Her men captured Franklin and were holding her when rival mercenaries intervened, rammed a car into Diana's office, and freed her. Diana fled to the United States and attempted to assassinate Franklin personally at her home. She nearly died doing it. The man who pulled her out was Eric Soders, a longtime friend of her parents and a senior ICA operative. He made her an offer, a job, a real infrastructure, actual resources. The condition was that she walk away from Cheryl Franklin and close the vendetta. Diana accepted. She apprenticed under handler Robin Gore and built her career from there. Soders, the man who rescued her, would later betray the ICA to Providence, the same organization whose subsidiary murdered her family. Diana would spend years wanting him dead for it, and she would eventually get her way. In Hitman 2016, the ICA does not publicly rank its handlers. There are no published performance metrics, also no internal leaderboards, and no numerical scores attached to Diana Burnwood's file that the games ever show you. What the games show you instead is the work itself, and the work makes the case without needing numbers. Listen to the Paris briefing, the Bangkok briefing, Sapienza. Diana doesn't just tell 47 where the target is. She tells him why the target chose that location, what secondary risks exist on the perimeter, what complications are likely to emerge, and when. She flags things 47 didn't ask about because she already modeled what he'd need before he knew he needed it. Her background explains some of it. Before the ICA, Diana spent years running her own intelligence operation, self-taught, working from personal resources, learning to find pressure points in people and institutions, with no formal training and no support structure. By the time Eric Soders recruited her at 19, she had already developed the core skill set the ICA spent years trying to build into its analyst, the ability to act on incomplete information and still arrive at the right conclusion. That specific quality, performing well when you don't know enough, is the only condition that consistently matters in field intelligence work. Controlled conditions with complete data are a training exercise. Real operations are always running on partial information, contradictory signals, and time pressure. Diana's entire pre-ICA career was conducted entirely in those conditions because she had no alternative. She is assigned to Agent 47, the ICA's most complex, most capable, and most unclassifiable asset. A man with no verifiable past, a psychological profile that doesn't fit any standard framework, and an operational record that shouldn't be possible. The organization didn't pair them together by accident. The asset who requires the most precise handling is assigned to the handler who is best at it. Before Diana became the ICA's most capable handler, she was trained by one named Robin Gore. And Gore is worth establishing clearly because she only appears in the Birth of the Hitman prequel comic, and players who haven't read it won't know who she is. The comic, written by Christopher Sabella and published by Dynamite in 2017, is treated as canonical backbone for the entire World of Assassination trilogy. IO Interactive referenced its events throughout Hitman 2 and Hitman 3. Gore lives in the comic rather than the games, so she is not fanfiction, she is lore. Gore ran her operation out of an office disguised as an accounting firm. Diana spent 5 weeks shadowing her, then 2 months in formal training as a junior ICA handler. By 1999, she was sitting alongside Gore and assisting on real contracts. The first one that mattered was in Paris. Their target was Franklin Marchand, publicly known as a satellite technology developer, privately a producer of chemical weapons in Afghanistan, whose facility had already killed at least 500 people. The ICA sent a 4-person team to eliminate him at Place de la Concorde. What neither Gore nor Diana anticipated was that a separate client had filed a competing contract on the same target, requiring the death to look like an accident rather than a shooting. An unnamed assassin systematically took out all 4 of their agents in rapid succession, then rigged the situation so that Marchand was killed by a car rather than a bullet. That assassin was Agent 47. Diana went downstairs on Gore's orders to salvage the operation. Instead, she found 47 in a bar afterward, assessed what she'd just watched him do, neutralize 4 trained ICA operatives without hesitation, and complete a contract cleaner than her entire team could manage, and made a decision. She recommended him to the ICA directly. She championed his recruitment against institutional resistance, including resistance from Eric Soders himself, and she would continue defending that decision for the next 2 decades. The ICA is not a government organization. It answers to no legislature, operates outside every legal framework, and has never been publicly acknowledged by any state. It is also, quietly, one of the most useful organizations on Earth to the intelligence services that know it exists. The canon is specific about which agencies those are: the CIA, FBI, MI5, MI6, NSA, CSIS, Interpol, and elements within the United Nations. These are overwhelmingly Western institutions. The ICA's relationships skew that direction deliberately, which is part of why the organization tends to operate against criminal targets, terrorists, and actors that Western governments want removed but can't officially touch. In 1996, Agent 47 prevented a terrorist attack at a UN summit. The UN took note. What followed was described as a tight operational relationship, one that eventually resulted in the ICA making an exception to their policy of never targeting former clients. When the UN requested a contract on Sergei Zavarotka for his possession of weapons of mass destruction, that is how institutional trust gets built in this world, quietly, through demonstrated usefulness, one exception at a time. This is how the ICA exists at all, not because it's impossible to find. Large operations always leave traces, but because every major player with the resources to shut it down has decided it's more valuable running. The ICA removes problems that governments need removed but can't officially touch. In exchange, it operates in a protected shadow. Nobody acknowledges it, nobody stops it. The ICA later discovers that 4 of its recent contracts were all connected, all part of the shadow client's systematic campaign against Providence's network. This forces them to confront the fact that Providence, the organization secretly funding and directing global power structures for generations, had also been using the ICA as an instrument. Providence then hired the ICA directly to locate and eliminate the shadow client. The agency that prided itself on neutrality was now an active piece in someone else's game, and the asset they sent to finish it was the same man the shadow client had been trying to reach all along. In 1999, when Agent 47 arrived at the ICA's remote mountain training facility, the man overseeing his evaluation was Eric Soders, considered the best ICA field operative of his generation, and by that point, already forced out of active duty by a congenital heart condition he'd been managing since birth. Soders didn't trust 47. The ICA ran thorough background checks on every recruit. With 47, they found almost nothing.
He claimed to have come from a Romanian asylum. Soders suspected he was lying, and the specific irony is that 47 had covered his tracks so perfectly that even the truth looked fabricated. The ICA's leverage over its assets depends entirely on knowing who they are, what they want, and what they're afraid of losing. 47 had no verifiable past, no known vices, no ties to anyone, nothing that could be used against him. To Soders, that made him not exceptional, but ungovernable. An asset with no knowable history was an asset that couldn't be controlled. The final test was a simulation of the Jasper Knight assassination. The 1979 mission Soders himself had completed at a heavily fortified Cuban airfield. It was already the hardest mission in Soders' career, widely studied by ICA handlers for its craft and strategic precision. Soders then loaded the simulation with additional guards beyond anything the original mission contained, well beyond what any standard ICA final test would require. The calculation was simple. 47 would fail. His exit would look like a natural outcome of a genuinely difficult evaluation, and no questions would be asked.
Diana's exact words in the briefing: ICA exams aren't normally this difficult. Soders wants you to fail. He considers you a threat, and this way your unfortunate exit from the program will not raise any eyebrows. He did not, however, factor me into the equation. If Soders can bend the rules, then so can I. 47 passed. Soders admonished Diana. He had no grounds to block the recruitment. By 2016, Soders had been elevated to the ICA board of directors. When 47 and Diana discovered he had been selling the identities of ICA operatives to Providence in exchange for a surgical procedure to finally fix the heart condition that had ended his field career, the same heart that had defined the limits of his entire life, the ICA authorized his elimination. The heart that forced him off the field is what put him on the table at Hokkaido. There's a temptation when you first encounter Providence in the game to think of it as a shadowy corporation, a Bilderberg group with assassination capabilities, a secret board of directors pulling strings from the top floor. That frame is too small, but also too old. Providence isn't ancient, it's post-war. It was founded in 1945. Thomas Carlyle gathered two college fraternity brothers, Douglas Ingram and Eckert Stuyvesant, at his family's estate in Dartmoor, England, and proposed pooling their family's already vast corporate influence into something that could govern the world behind the scenes. Three dynasties, the Stuyvesants, Ingrams, and Carlyles, had grown wealthy during the cutthroat capitalism of the 19th century, retreated from public view, and spent the decades that followed quietly inserting loyal operatives into key positions inside the world's largest corporations, governments, and institutions. Later, that structure had a specific shape: three anonymous partners at the top, a professional constant beneath them handling day-to-day operations, and a layered network of heralds and operatives extending outward through every industry on Earth. The partners didn't appear in public. They communicated through couriers. They met their constant through virtual reality, broadcasting signals to a suspended conference facility in an undisclosed mountain location. Their identities were kept secret even from most high-ranking members of their own organization. Their stated purpose, delivered plainly by one of their own operatives in the Colorado mission: we are not an organization that pursues grandiose master plans, end-of-the-world countdowns, or insane idealism. We are conservatives and pragmatists. We maintain things, not destroy them. Providence doesn't consider itself evil. It considers itself necessary. It believes, with the genuine conviction of people who have been making decisions at civilized scale long enough to forget what it looked like before they did, that the stability of the world depends on their continued management of it. Lucas Gray raids their archive in New York, identifies their operatives, and begins dismantling their network systematically. Providence hires the ICA to stop him. The agency that had operated in Providence's shadow for decades is now being used as its instrument, sent to eliminate the man who had decided enough was enough. In the 1960s, Yanis, then Providence's constant, recruited Ortmeyer and arranged backing from Thomas Carlyle to fund the Institute for Human Betterment. What Providence wanted in exchange was simple: a human asset with no government affiliation, no traceable identity, and zero history. A weapon they could aim at any problem on Earth. What's important to understand is that Providence didn't build the program. Ortmeyer designed it. Providence funded it and provided protection, keeping authorities away from what was happening beneath the psychiatric wards. The forefathers were already Ortmeyer's own Legion comrades. The organ arrangement was his idea. Providence's contribution was resources and cover, in exchange for eventual delivery of whatever the project produced. By the late 1990s, everyone was losing patience. Providence wanted 47 handed over so they could shut the program down. The forefathers, themselves aging, still dependent on clone-harvested organs, growing frustrated with Ortmeyer's delays, wanted 47 for their own use. Ortmeyer, caught between them, made a decision. He created a deliberate gap in the asylum security and let 47 walk out. The morning after 47's escape, Edward, who had by then succeeded Yanis as constant, arrived at the asylum. What he said to Ortmeyer is one of the most precisely worded threats in the trilogy. "If I were a more suspicious man, I'd say you've made yourself indispensable at a time when you were very much disposable." Translation: you still have something we want. That's the only reason you're still alive. Ortmeyer understood. He spent the time that followed producing the number 48 series, a new batch of clones designed to give Providence what they wanted without surrendering 47 specifically. Simultaneously, he filed ICA contracts on all 4 of his former partners, using 47 as the instrument of their deaths. Without the ICA knowing, the contracts shared a source. He was settling scores and buying time at the same time. It didn't work indefinitely. Ortmeyer died at 47's hands when 47 returned to the asylum at the end of Codename 47. The man who built the most capable assassin on Earth used him to eliminate everyone who had helped make that possible, and then arranged, in his own way, to be the last one on the list. At the apex of Providence are 3 individuals known only as the Partners, the supreme heads of the organization, and by extension, the most powerful people in the world during the events of Hitman 2016. They are not permanent individuals. The positions pass through dynasties. The founding partners were Eckert Stuyvesant, Douglas Ingram, and Thomas Carlyle, the 3 men who formed Providence in 1945. By 2016, their heirs have assumed the roles: Marcus Stuyvesant, Carl Ingram, and Alexa Carlyle. The families are constant. The faces change between generations. Their identities are kept secret from almost everyone inside Providence itself, including high-ranking members and heralds. The one exception is the constant. Edwards is the single point of knowledge through which the entire upper structure of the organization operates. He reports directly to the partners. He knows who they are. He communicates their instructions downward through the Herald network. If you want to find the partners, you need Edwards first. The partners communicate with each other and with Edwards through virtual reality. Their digital signals broadcast to a suspended conference facility in an undisclosed mountainous location. They never appear in the same physical space if it can be avoided. The anonymity is not vanity. It is a structural countermeasure. If one partner is exposed, the other 2 continue. If the constant is killed, the partners still exist. The organization is designed to survive the death of any single component. What the files establish about Edwards is that his loyalty to the structure has a fracture running through it. He is a middle-class meritocrat who built himself into the most operationally important person in the most powerful organization on Earth, and the 3 families made clear, at some point, that none of that would ever be enough to make him one of them. The constant position is the ceiling. Partner was never an offer. Edwards absorbed that information, continued working, and filed it away. The trilogy is the consequence of that filing. In the game, this is all background architecture. The partners are voices in a meeting room. They exist at the edge of the story. What the game is really doing is introducing the structure so that when it starts to come apart in the sequels, you already understand exactly what's breaking and why. The Shadow Client is introduced as an antagonist, a mysterious figure running a private militia, orchestrating attacks against Providence-connected targets across the world, feeding anonymous tips to wealthy clients who had been wronged by Providence, guiding those clients to hire the ICA, and letting the ICA contract 47 to do the actual work. Paris, Sapienza, Marrakesh, Bangkok. Every mission in the game is, from a different angle, Gray's operation. 47 had been someone else's weapon without knowing it. Again, the name Shadow Client doesn't even exist until the end of Bangkok, when 47 coins it himself after the ICA finally identifies that an organized figure is behind the pattern of contracts. What 47 finds in the Colorado War Room is a conspiracy board that goes further back than the current game's missions. Photos of previous targets, the Beldingfords, the Hayamotos, alongside everything from Paris to Bangkok, all mapped, connected, and traced. Gray had been tracking 47 for years before 2016. He knew 47's operational signature, his methods, his MO. He had built the entire campaign around his specific capabilities. After clearing the compound and eliminating the 4 militia leaders, 47 steps outside. Gray has him in the crosshairs of a sniper rifle from a nearby hill. He takes his finger off the trigger. He lets 47 go. The line he delivers, "I know you better than anyone," is the emotional payload the entire game has been building toward. The full picture is implied, but not yet confirmed. What the Colorado ending establishes is that the Shadow Client knows 47 personally, that he was part of the same program 47 came from, and that he chose not to pull the trigger. The game ends with Providence making an offer to 47, help them bring down the Shadow Client, and they'll tell him everything about his past. The identity of Lucas Gray and the confirmed connection to Subject 6 is fully revealed in Hitman 2. What the 2016 game plants is the question. The man who had 47 in his sights and lowered the weapon, who built a years-long war around engineering a reunion with someone who no longer remembers him, is not an enemy. He was never an enemy. He just needed 47 to remember that. After escaping from the asylum in 1989, Gray spent years as a mercenary. Chechnya, Sierra Leone, the wider shadow military world that absorbs people with skills that have no civilian application. He carried his full memories throughout all of it. Nothing was suppressed. He knew exactly what Providence had done to him and to 47. What he didn't have for a long time was a way in. The way in was Eugene Cobb. Gray eventually became head of security and personal bodyguard for Cobb, the CEO of Milton Fitzpatrick, a Providence-backed finance firm. Working in close proximity to the man, Gray discovered that Cobb wasn't just a banker. He was a Providence herald, a key holder. Specifically, he was in possession of a physical key that unlocked a Providence archive vault in New York, containing the full record of the organization's assets and operatives. Gray killed Cobb on his private jet over the Pacific. He destroyed the plane to cover his tracks. The FAA recorded it as a radar malfunction, Cobb as missing, but the vault required 2 keys, not 1. Gray tracked down a second Providence herald named Hudgen, ambushed him in the backseat of his car at Ether's headquarters in Johannesburg, and held him at gunpoint. Hudgen handed over the key. Gray thanked him and shot him. With both keys, he opened the vault in New York and took everything. What came next was methodical. Gray approached Viktor Novikov, Russian billionaire, fashion mogul, and covert operator of the IAGO spy network. Gray had learned of the FSB's ongoing investigation into Novikov and used that knowledge as leverage. He eliminated an FSB agent named Komarov, who was closing in on Novikov. In exchange, Novikov handed over everything IAGO had compiled on the global elite. Combined with the Providence archive, Gray now had a comprehensive map of the organization's reach. He built a private militia. He formed an alliance with the Delgado cartel for logistics and smuggling. He began anonymously tipping off parties who had been wronged by Providence, guiding them to hire the ICA, and letting the ICA contract 47, the one asset whose capabilities he already knew better than anyone, to do the actual work. Paris, Sapienza, Marrakesh, Bangkok. Every mission in Hitman 2016 is Gray's operation. He just never told anyone that. IAGO, the spy network run by Viktor Novikov and Dalia Margolis, is named after the antagonist of Shakespeare's Othello. We don't know if IO did the naming deliberately, but the parallel works so precisely that it barely needs an official explanation. The original IAGO is the defining literary model for a specific kind of manipulation, working at multiple removes from the actual act, shaping what people know and don't know, letting the consequences of information do the violence, while his hands stay clean. The spy network IAGO operates on the same model, with one important distinction. It isn't purely passive. IAGO sold security network information to Crimean separatists, who used it to cause a nuclear meltdown in the Gulf of Odessa. It provided the Delgado cartel with the flight plans of South American President Hernandez's family aircraft, allowing the cartel to shoot the plane out of the sky. These aren't downstream consequences. They are operational partnerships with violent actors. IAGO selects the buyers, provides the specific intelligence required, and accepts payment. The blood is someone else's. The decision to make it possible is entirely theirs. IAGO was established in 1954, predating Novikov and Margolis' involvement by decades. By 2019, Viktor Novikov serves as the public face and financial backer. He is, in the ICA's assessment, a figurehead. Dalia Margolis is the actual operational mind, a former supermodel who built genuine strategic control over an organization whose founder she wasn't. She knows who almost everyone in that auction room is, what they want, and what they're afraid of. She uses that knowledge without hesitation. The specific product being sold in Paris is MI6's NOOCC list, the identities of every undercover British foreign intelligence agent currently in the field. The moment that list changes hands, every person on it is exposed. Most will be killed by the organizations they've been infiltrating. IAGO doesn't pull the trigger, they just arrange the transfer. British intelligence contracts the ICA to stop the auction. Both targets are eliminated. The Paris mission ends. An NPC in the follow-up mission confirms IAGO dissolved entirely following Margolis' death. The organization that had operated since 1954 ceased to exist the day its real leader did. Viktor Novikov is actually more interesting than a typical crime boss target. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, he made his first fortune in Russian real estate. A subsequent recession wiped most of it out. He turned to crime to maintain his lifestyle: corporate espionage, extortion, insurance fraud, kidnapping, arson. When the FSB got too close, he had their director framed as a CIA mole and murdered. Novikov is not a complicated man with hidden depths. He is a thug who is also, genuinely, a man who loves fashion. In 2014, Dalia Margolis convinced him to purchase Sanguine, one of Europe's oldest couture brands, and use it as a front for IAGO. That detail matters. It was her idea. Novikov provided the money and the public face. Dalia provided the strategy. He bought a fashion house because she told him to. What the game establishes through background NPC conversations and his own behavior throughout the mission is that somewhere in the 5 years since, Novikov stopped pretending. He genuinely enjoys being a fashion mogul. He basks in the attention. He takes the stage at his own show with the energy of someone who has forgotten or decided not to care that none of it started as real. The people who work for Sanguine and have no idea about IAGO describe him as demanding, difficult, and completely invested in the event going well. He is also in love with Dalia. The game makes this clear in a specific, clinical way. If Dalia dies first, Novikov responds with genuine distress. If Novikov dies first, Dalia's only concern is whether the auction has been exposed. She was already planning to have him eliminated. His criminal past had become a liability to IAGO's operations, and she had the succession arranged. He thought they were building something together. She had already decided when she was going to end it. The game's internal logic here is precise. Novikov and Dalia are the same kind of person, ruthless operators who use people, but Novikov has a blind spot exactly the size of her. That blind spot is what makes him, in the end, killable in the way the mission's most elegant solutions require. Lure him somewhere private, use what he cares about to get him there. He never saw it coming. She would have. Novikov is not a good person. Viktor Novikov's favorite drink is the bare knuckle boxer. The game describes it as an obscure cocktail that most bartenders have never encountered, and that's accurate to the source material, because the bare knuckle boxer is a real drink. It comes from a bar called The Revelry in Rochester, New York. Irish whiskey, orgeat syrup, fresh lemon juice, and a whole strawberry, shaken and served on the rocks. IO adapted it for the game and placed the recipe on a piece of paper in a hallway off the basement kitchen of the Palais de Volevska, waiting to be found. The mission story built around it is called A Drink to Die For. Over here, 2 palace staff, near the basement entrance, discussing the fact that Novikov has asked for his usual and none of them know how to make it. Find a palace staff disguise, retrieve the recipe, get behind the bar, mix the drink, and spike it with emetic rat poison. The poison doesn't kill him, it makes him sick. Novikov excuses himself and walks to the nearest bathroom alone because his bodyguard, Kurt Donovan, doesn't follow him inside. That's where the kill happens. 47 drowns him in the toilet or uses the fiber wire. The drink is the vector that gets him through a door by himself. Novikov cycles past the bar repeatedly throughout his patrol loop, asking for the bare-knuckle boxer each time. Nobody can make it. He keeps asking. That behavioral loop is what the mission story exploits. His specific, recurring preference is the opening the level creates. The canonical kill, for what it's worth, is not the cocktail. The opening sequence of Hitman 3 shows a flashback of Novikov being crushed by the chandelier on the catwalk. That's what the game considers to have actually happened. But the bare-knuckle boxer route is the one that encodes the most character information. Novikov built himself from a criminal past into a man hosting Paris's most glamorous event, and somewhere in that climb he developed a very specific taste that almost nobody can satisfy. The thing that made him feel singular is the thing that isolated him at the moment it mattered. The killer found the gap, mixed the drink, and waited. Dalia Margolis was born in Israel, the daughter of a hawkish Israeli army general, who was also a Mossad officer. He was strict enough that when she chose modeling over the path he'd laid out, he cut her off completely. That estrangement, the thing that should have been a setback, became the foundation of everything she built afterward. She went cold, she went independent, she went to work. Following in her father's footsteps before breaking from them entirely, she became a Mossad agent and used her modeling career to gather intelligence. She was genuinely successful at both. The modeling career was real. She became one of the most iconic faces of her generation. The intelligence work was equally real. Her Mossad record, cited directly in the Paris mission briefing, includes facilitating the drone strike that killed Red Saber in Lebanon, and the intelligence work that led to the arrest of a counterintelligence handler known as the mongoose. These are not background details from supplementary lore. Diana names them in the briefing cutscene before 47 sets foot in the Palais. After her modeling career passed its natural peak, Dalia made a choice. She didn't return to Mossad in a diminished capacity. She took control of IAGO, a spy network established in 1954, decades before her involvement, and turned it into the most sophisticated private intelligence operation in the world. She didn't build it from scratch. She inherited its infrastructure and made it hers. What drives her is not just ambition. The canon is explicit. She uses IAGO's global espionage reach specifically as an instrument of revenge against her father. The man who cut her off is a Mossad officer. His world is intelligence, secrets, and networks of trust. She built a private organization that operates in that same world and answers to nobody, least of all, him. The woman who helped Mossad capture the mongoose is the same woman auctioning the complete NOOCC list of British undercover agents to the highest bidder in Paris. She knows exactly what those agents' lives are worth. She also knows exactly what her father would think of what she's doing. That's not incidental. For Dalia, it may be the whole point. Dalia Margolis operates at an informational level that the Paris mission's surface doesn't fully expose. Among the things she knows and has chosen to act on at a specific time, rather than immediately, her personal secretary, Haley, is an intelligence asset working for Valerie St. Clair, one of IAGO's competitors in the private intelligence market. Haley has been feeding St. Clair's organization information about IAGO's operations and clients. Dalia knows this. She has known this for some time. She has not eliminated Haley yet, because Haley is useful while the auction is running. An assistant who is leaking information to a competitor is still an assistant who can receive calls, manage logistics, and keep the auction's operational surface functioning smoothly. Dalia's calculation is simple. Let her do the job until the job is done, then remove the problem. The auction finishes, the NOOCC list transfers, the buyers disperse, and Haley dies. That's the plan as Dalia holds it, calm and scheduled, while Haley handles her correspondence 10 feet away. This detail is only accessible if players observe carefully enough to overhear the specific conversations that establish it. It isn't flagged. It isn't mission critical. It's part of the texture of who Dalia actually is. A woman who is never not running multiple operations simultaneously, who sees every person around her as a function rather than a person, and who manages even the betrayals in her immediate environment as logistical problems to be resolved at optimal timing rather than emotional provocations to be responded to. She isn't cruel, she's precise, which is a worse thing to be. NOOCC stands for non-official cover. It describes a specific category of intelligence officer, one who operates with no official connection to their government's diplomatic or military presence in the country they're working in. A standard intelligence officer under diplomatic cover has a fallback if they're exposed. They get expelled. Persona non grata. Inconvenient, embarrassing, but survivable, because diplomatic immunity maintains its function through reciprocity, and killing diplomats breaks that system for everyone. A NOOCC officer has none of that. They carry no official identity. As far as any foreign government is concerned, they're a civilian. If they're exposed, they're just a foreign spy, and foreign spies can be treated however the capturing organization decides. The list being auctioned at the Paris Fashion Show is MI6's complete NOOCC list. Every undercover British foreign intelligence officer currently operating in the field. The moment that list changes hands, every person on it is exposed to whoever buys it. The buyers in that attic include the Delgado drug cartel, a Providence operative, a Gulf royal family, and representatives from Crystal Dawn, a terrorist organization. IAGO had no ideology. It seated opposing factions at the same auction simultaneously and felt no obligation to consider what any of them would do with what they purchased.
This is the same organization that sold network information to Crimean separatists, who used it to cause a nuclear meltdown in the Gulf of Odessa, and provided President Hernandez's flight plans to the Delgado cartel so they could shoot his plane out of the sky. Everyone on that list is dead the moment it changes hands. Not by IAGO's hand, by whoever buys it and uses it. IAGO just facilitated the transfer. What the game doesn't flag overtly is that the contract itself, the anonymous tip that sent MI6 to the ICA, which sent the ICA to 47, came from Gray. He arranged it. He knew what IAGO had, knew MI6 would pay to stop the auction, and knew the ICA would send 47. Paris wasn't just MI6 protecting its officers. It was Gray's operation, using MI6's money and 47's hands to dismantle the first node in Providence's network. Dalia knew exactly what those agents' lives were worth. She just decided their lives weren't her problem. Lucas Gray didn't attend the Paris fashion show. He was outside. The canon establishes him watching Agent 47's plane take off from Paris after the mission concluded. He observed from a distance, not from inside the Palais. What he was watching was confirmation, the first act of his plan executing exactly as designed. The sequence that put 47 in Paris had been Gray's work from the beginning. He had met with Viktor Novikov, used his knowledge of the FSB investigation to make himself useful, killed FSB agent Nikolai Kemerov on Novikov's behalf, and collected his payment. Everything IAGO had compiled on the global elite. Then, as Novikov was leaving, Gray texted his associate, almost certainly Olivia Hall, to begin leaking Novikov and Dalia Margolis' names to MI6. His parting words to Novikov: "I have a feeling this is going to be the show you'll be remembered for." He had gotten what he needed from Novikov, triggered the mechanism that would get him killed, and walked away. MI6, now knowing IAGO was about to auction their NOOCC list, hired the ICA. The ICA contracted 47. Gray never appeared in the chain of instructions at any point. Watching that plane take off was Gray seeing proof that the system worked, that 47 was everything his years of observation had suggested, that the ICA's best asset could do, unknowingly, what Gray needed done, and do it cleanly enough that nobody would trace the pattern until it was already too late. He spent the rest of the game's timeline engineering the subsequent contracts the same way. Sapienza, Marrakesh, Bangkok, each one built around a client who had a genuine reason to hire the ICA, guided by information Gray provided, producing contracts that pointed 47 at the next node in Providence's network. Gray never contacted 47 directly. He just watched from a distance and arranged the conditions. The Colorado ending is the first time they're in the same physical space, with both of them aware of each other, since they were children in a Romanian field. Gray has 47 in a sniper scope and doesn't pull the trigger. He lowers the rifle. He says, "I know you better than anyone." He had been proving that for the entire game, from a distance, in silence. Through every mission, 47 thought he was running for the ICA. Helmet Krueger is the star of the sanguine fashion show, globally recognized at the peak of his career, and according to Diana's radio briefing, the moment 47 walks past his billboard, "He has your cheekbones, 47." The resemblance is close enough that 47 can take Krueger's outfit and walk through the entire Palais de Volovska with no enforcers seeing through the disguise, even without the makeup. With the face paint applied by a stylist in the dressing area, the disguise becomes the best on the map. No enforcer on the property can see through it. Guards won't frisk him. Dalia grants him a private meeting. What makes Krueger more interesting than a simple look-alike prop is what he actually is. Not a knowing intelligence operative, but a mark being converted into one. Dalia summoned him to Paris to give him his first IAGO assignment: seduce Jessica Highmore, befriend her father John, and extract information about Highmore Consulting's upcoming merger. When she hands him a bottle of cyanide pills as a last resort, Krueger panics. He has no idea what he's gotten into. He thinks he's doing Dalia a social favor. He walks away from that meeting shaken and calls a colleague to say he's planning to retire from modeling and use Dalia's payment to start his own fashion brand. The contrast between Krueger and 47 in the same role is one of the mission's quiet jokes. When the real Helmet meets Dalia, she concludes he's completely inept. When 47 meets her wearing Helmet's face, she thinks she's talking to an experienced professional and is impressed. The resemblance has consequences beyond Paris. In the Hokkaido mission, a guest named Jason Portman underwent extensive plastic surgery specifically to look like Helmet Krueger. He wanted 47's face, just one layer removed. IAGO has never officially explained the resemblance. No canon document addresses why a random German fashion model and a genetically engineered clone share the same bone structure. It may be a joke, it may be deliberate ambiguity. Either way, IAGO has kept silent on it for years, which is exactly the kind of silence that keeps a fan community asking the question indefinitely. The class were working on their second studio album at the Hitman Hotel. Their first release was an EP called Soft Currency. The second, the one 47 walks in on the tail end of, is called Providence. IAGO didn't hide that title in in-game documentation. They announced it openly as part of the Bangkok marketing campaign. Physical vinyl records sent to journalists, real social media accounts for the band, a live Bandcamp page where you can still download all 3 recorded tracks. The album existed as a real promotional artifact. IAGO built a fake band complete enough that people who received the record had to look twice. The naming is the detail worth sitting with. Thomas Cross, Jordan's father, the man who covered up Hannah Highmore's murder, the man Jordan has spent his entire public career defining himself against, as a Providence-connected power broker. The record label that signed the class, Monumental Records, is later confirmed in Hitman 3 to be a Providence media asset. There is a real possibility that Thomas Cross, estranged from his son and unable to reach him directly, quietly used his Providence connections to hand Jordan his career. Jordan Cross named his most personal album after the word that structures his father's entire career, and probably his own, without the public ever knowing what it meant. Whether Jordan chose the name knowingly is something the game leaves deliberately ambiguous. The canon leans toward yes. His lyrics are described in ambient conversations as being about captivity, rebellion, and lashing out at things too large and close to name directly. When confronted with the Hannah Highmore tape, Jordan warns 47 that his father will send very dangerous people if he dies, which implies he understands, at minimum, the kind of organization his father moves in. A man who knows his father runs with people who send very dangerous people to handle problems, named his album after the word those people use for themselves. Either he encoded the most honest thing he ever said about his life into the title of his art, or the word followed him into his work, the way his father's money followed him everywhere, present and unacknowledged. IAGO doesn't confirm which. The silence around that question is part of what makes Bangkok the most quietly layered mission in the game. Silvio Caruso named his work in his audio journal, recorded in the observatory at Villa Caruso. He refers to the DNA-specific virus program as Project Samael. Samael is the archangel from Hebrew scripture, whose name literally translates as venom of God, associated with death, with precision, with the inevitable collection of souls at the appointed moment. The name tells you exactly how Caruso thought about what he was building. The virus, in its theoretical complete state, would be encoded with a specific person's DNA and released into the open air, invisible, undetectable, passing through the entire world population without inflicting any harm until it encountered the one genetic sequence it was designed for, at which point it would be lethal. Diana's briefing describes it as a bullet fired in any direction, passing through countless bodies without inflicting harm, invisible and undetectable, until it strikes its target. The project appealed to Caruso precisely because of what it meant for power. He had been weak his entire life, bullied as a child, manipulated by his mother, unable to function in normal social conditions. This was a weapon that turned weakness into a hunting capability. The strong had always had the advantage. Samael was designed to end that. The Ether Corporation installed the lab beneath Villa Caruso and assigned Francesca DeSantis to oversee it and to spy on Caruso, whom Ether had already begun to view as a liability. Caruso was aware of this. He kept a sample of Francesca's DNA locked in a safe in the villa's attic and had a functional prototype encoded with her specific DNA hidden inside a model ship in his bedroom. He had already decided what he would do with it if necessary. The Ether Board was largely unaware the project existed at the scope it had reached. Gray anonymously leaked its existence to a major Ether shareholder, who hired the ICA on ethical grounds to stop it. Same pattern as Paris. Gray identifies the target, finds someone with genuine motivation to pay for the contract, and lets the ICA deliver 47 without knowing the broader context. Caruso called it after the angel who collects the dead. He was building a tool for the precise collection of specific people. The name was accurate. He just didn't anticipate being one of the people it was used to collect. Isabella Caruso was a profoundly damaging parent. After her husband died and Silvio's twin older brothers fled home, she clung to Silvio, her least favorite child, and spent years psychologically dismantling him to ensure he never left. She made him feel like a failure systematically. She cultivated his social isolation. When Silvio developed feelings for a girl in high school named Amelia, what appears to have been his first genuine emotional connection with anyone, Isabella paid one of her gardener's sons to seduce Amelia away from him, then photographed the encounter and showed it to Silvio. What she told him? Romantic love is fleeting. Only a mother's love endures. The result was gynophobia, a fear of women, that defined the rest of his social life. Isabella found this convenient. Silvio eventually smothered her with a pillow in her bedroom. The death was recorded as natural causes. Nobody suspected him. What followed is the detail that makes him genuinely disturbing. He preserved her room exactly as it was. He maintained her routines. He ordered flowers for the anniversary of her death and visited her grave. And when he stood at the gravestone, he talked to her. The staff found it unsettling. 1 year before the mission's events, Silvio suffered a mental breakdown after the gramophone in the dining hall turned on by itself, and he saw her stair lift move on its own. He followed the trail upstairs to her bedroom, entered alone, and was found unconscious by his staff with no recollection of what he'd witnessed inside. Both the grave list and the therapy session with Dr. Lafayette are mission opportunities that produce confessions. At the grave, Silvio says he wishes his mother was still alive, so he could smother her all over again. In therapy, he admits the full story. The game then gives players the options to kill him the same way he killed her. The Isabella Caruso character is explicitly based on Norma Bates from Psycho. IAGO didn't hide the reference. The entire Sapienza storyline is a Hitchcock film compressed into a mission. A brilliant, broken man, haunted by a woman he murdered and still can't leave behind, being visited by someone he doesn't know is there to finish what she started. Sapienza has 6 mission stories. The most psychologically loaded one is called Catharsis. Dr. Oscar Lafayette is a world-renowned therapist who has been contracted by Ether to stabilize Silvio Caruso following his mental breakdown. This is his first session with Caruso, which means the villa staff have no idea what Lafayette looks like. 47 poisons his coffee with emetic rat poison, follows him to the bathroom, renders him unconscious, takes his clothes, and walks through the villa's front gate. The butler escorts him to Silvio's private quarters. 47 sits in the therapist's chair by the fireplace and waits. Silvio arrives. He lies down on the sofa. He starts talking. He doesn't need to be prompted. He talks about his mother, about Amelia, about Isabella's interference, about the love-hate relationship he held for her for his entire life. Then he admits it. He smothered her with a pillow. The session surfaces the confession automatically. 47 just has to be present. When Silvio finishes talking and lies still on the sofa, a prompt appears. Smother him with the pillow. The game doesn't announce what it's doing. It just places the option there, quiet and deliberate, for anyone who is listening to what Silvio just said. There is a second route to the same confession. Silvio ordered flowers for the anniversary of Isabella's death, but the delivery van crashed outside the villa. If 47 finds the bouquet and places it on Isabella's grave, Silvio will go there alone, dismiss his guards, and speak to the gravestone. He tells her he wishes she were still alive. Then he tells her why, so he could smother her again. The kill at the graveside is a different method, but the confession is identical. Players who don't pursue these routes kill a troubled scientist. Players who follow either of them kill a man who just confessed to the worst thing he ever did, to someone he believed was either bound by therapeutic confidentiality or a dead woman who couldn't tell anyone. IO named the pillow challenge Silence of the Man, a reference to the Silence of the Lambs, the film about a psychologist who murders his patients. They were precise about the joke. They were also precise about making it available in silence, without commentary, for anyone who understood what Silvio had just told them. He knew. This is the detail that makes Sapienza's internal logic coherent in a way the surface narrative never fully spells out. Inside a model ship in the storage closet off Silvio's bedroom, accessible only to players who explore thoroughly enough to find it, is a prototype vial of the Samael virus. The in-game description confirms it directly, targeted to Francesca DeSantis' DNA only. Silvio knew she had been sent to spy on him. He kept a sample of her DNA locked in a safe in the villa's attic, collected without her knowledge, and had already built a working prototype encoded with her specific sequence. The prototype is unfinished. It can't spread person to person, and its effective range is limited, but it is functional. If it makes contact with Francesca, it kills her. He had already made that. What makes the full picture more complicated and more tragic is what Francesca had become by the time of the mission. Despite being sent to manage Caruso as a liability and authorize his elimination if necessary, she had grown genuinely sympathetic toward him. A phone call with a colleague confirms she wanted to kill him painlessly, staging it as a guilt-induced suicide rather than an execution. She didn't want him to suffer. Silvio was building a weapon with her DNA. She was hoping to spare him pain. Neither of them knew what the other was actually doing. Caruso was also building the virus for other people simultaneously. He hired a fixer named Sal Falcone to collect DNA samples from his childhood bullies, the kids who taunted him in Sapienza growing up. He was planning to kill them from his villa using the virus, remotely and invisibly, decades after the fact. The man who was afraid to leave home was building weapons to reach the people who had shaped his fear of the world. The prototype in the model ship is the mission's quiet thesis statement. Silvio Caruso is not a naive eccentric who got in over his head. He is a man who was collecting DNA samples from the people he intended to kill. He had already manufactured a working kill mechanism for the person watching him, and was doing all of this while hearing his dead mother's voice in empty rooms and visiting her grave to apologize. The mission story, A Case Most Peculiar, begins in the Sapienza barbershop, where two locals mention a private detective who's been asking questions around town. That detective is Sal Falcone, a private investigator from Milan, currently sleeping on a bench in the town's alleys. Wake him up, and he calls Francesca DeSantis to arrange a meeting. Subdue him, take his identity, and 47 can meet Francesca at the pier instead. When she asks Falcone what Caruso hired him for, the answer is exactly what the earlier mission story about the prototype has already implied. Caruso gave him a list of names, paid him a great deal of money, and asked him to collect DNA samples from each person on it. All of them were Silvio's childhood bullies. The game states this plainly, It is heavily implied he intended to have them all killed with the virus. These are all people who have almost certainly moved on. People with families, jobs, lives. People who probably don't remember his name. They are, right now, somewhere in Italy, unknowingly providing the raw material for their own deaths. Silvio Caruso, from the villa he has never left, was building the specific infrastructure required to reach each of them from a distance and kill them invisibly. There is one bully the game names specifically, a man called Lorenzo Abbiati, who threw Silvio into a well as a child. Abbiati grew up to become a local politician, running for mayor of Sapienza. In the bonus mission Landslide, set before the main game's events, Caruso himself hired the ICA to eliminate Abbiati at his campaign rally on the beach. He already used 47 to kill the worst one. Falcone's list was for the rest. The Samael project had a corporate pitch, a geopolitical game changer, a weapon of unprecedented precision. That was the language that got Ether's funding and the underground laboratory and the legitimate cover. The actual project was a bullied man who never left home, building a mechanism to reach everyone who had ever made him feel small and ensure they couldn't escape it. He was building a weapon of mass destruction. He was pointing it at the kids from school. Those are the same project. Sapienza was modeled after the Ligurian village of Vernazza and various towns along the Amalfi coast in southern Italy. The design started as 2 words, coastal, town. Lead level designer Torbjorn Christensen and an environment artist spent 2 weeks mocking up a rough version during I.O.'s summer holiday, working undisturbed while the rest of the studio was on vacation. The team never went to Italy. All research was done remotely using YouTube and Google Street View. The result, according to Italian players who provided feedback after launch, was convincingly authentic anyway. The core design priority was verticality, specifically how coastal towns stack streets and corridors on top of each other and connect everything through unexpected routes. That ambition explains why Sapienza feels larger than it is. The map is built in layers, spiraling downward from the market streets through the villa to the cave system underneath, with every level interconnected. Creative director Christian Elverdam described the result as the pinnacle of I.O.'s Swiss cheese design, a volume of content constructed meticulously and filled with connections, where movement in any direction eventually opens into a new opportunity or a new path forward. The contrast between the surface and what's underneath was deliberate. Elverdam confirmed that the most obvious tension in Sapienza is between the idyllic setting and Caruso's own internal turmoil. You're walking through a market with fresh produce, church bells, and tourists, and below it, in carved stone tunnels that open into gleaming sterile research infrastructure, there are canisters of something that could kill any designated person on Earth. The cave system is the mission's most technically impressive environmental achievement. Because of that transition specifically, cobbled market streets to stone tunnel to clinical laboratory, all within a single continuous map. No loading screen, no visual break, just a descent into something that shouldn't exist underneath a place that beautiful. I.O. built a bioweapons facility beneath one of the most convincing fictional coastlines in any game ever made, and never needed to visit the real place to pull it off. They did it with a laptop, a summer holiday, and 2 weeks of YouTube. Sapienza is still, nearly a decade later, widely considered the best level I.O. has ever designed. The mission is called World of Tomorrow. The contract has 3 targets: Silvio Caruso, Francesca DeSantis, and the virus itself. Not as a secondary objective, not as a bonus. Listed at the same tier as killing a human target, with its own objective marker and its own suite of approaches. The confirmed destruction methods are: the temperature control panel inside the lab overheats the cooling system and destroys the canister. This is the cleanest method with one critical side effect. It draws Francesca DeSantis down to the lab to investigate, meaning destroying the virus this way can simultaneously set up her kill. 2 objectives, 1 action. A stalactite above the central lab unit can be shot with a sniper rifle from the cave's far side, causing it to drop and crush the storage system. The angle is available from the pier near the cave entrance. This is the fastest method for players who want to destroy the virus without entering the lab at all. The Biolab laptop dongle, carried by a female lab technician, can be used on a computer on top of a prefab south of the lab to remotely trigger destruction. A remote EMP charge placed near the same computer achieves the same result without requiring the dongle. The canister can also be shot directly from inside the cave. The design choice worth examining is why the virus is a named target at all. IAGO could have made it an environmental interaction. Reach the lab, interact with the canisters, mission complete. Instead, they gave it the same objective weight as a human elimination and built multiple risk-differentiated approaches around it. The same design language used for 47's human targets is applied to a piece of biotechnology. The game is making an argument through structure. The Samael project isn't just Silvio Caruso's work. It's a thing in the world with its own existence and its own threat, and it has to be ended on its own terms. Killing Caruso and leaving the virus intact would be a partial success, just as killing the virus and leaving Caruso alive would be. Both Francesca and the canister exist because either one, left standing, means the project continues. The mission title is World of Tomorrow. The third target is what that world looks like if 47 doesn't finish the job. By the time 47 arrives in Marrakesh, Gray's plan is already in its second major phase. Klaus Hugo Strandberg was a Swedish banker and former CEO who had stolen billions from the Moroccan people and was awaiting trial for investment fraud. Reza Zaiden, one of Morocco's most senior generals, driven entirely by personal ambition, arranged Strandberg's escape from his prison transport himself, killing several police officers in the process. Strandberg fled to the Swedish consulate, where Erik Olander, the Swedish consul, and an actual Providence operative was waiting to receive him. The plan was methodical, with Strandberg in the consulate generating public outrage. Zaiden seeded the protests outside with agents who used Crystal Dawn terrorist ideology to encourage violence, giving him justification to declare martial law in the name of national security. He intended to repeat the strategy in Rabat and Casablanca. A Morocco under martial law and then under Zaiden's control would be favorable to Providence-connected financial interests and impossible for outside parties to challenge. Gray identified this and found the natural counterweight. Hamilton Lowe was a multinational construction conglomerate with enormous Moroccan government contracts that would be destroyed if political instability followed a coup. They had every financial reason to want Zaiden stopped. Gray leaked information about the coup to them directly. Hamilton Lowe hired the ICA without understanding the source of their intelligence. The ICA contracted 47. While 47 was in Marrakesh, Gray was in New York, using the two keys taken from Cobb and Hygen to open the Providence vault and take everything inside. He wasn't watching the mission. He was running a parallel operation in a different city simultaneously. The client who hired the ICA had no idea they were a piece in someone else's game. The ICA had no idea the job fit a larger pattern. 47 had no idea the man who engineered the mission had once made a blood pact with him on a farmhouse floor in Romania. This is what makes Gray's operation more sophisticated than a militia campaign. He doesn't attack Providence directly. He finds parties with existing grievances and existing incentives, gives them the specific information they need to act on those incentives, and lets other people's self-interest do the work. Hamilton Lowe thought they were protecting their contracts. They were dismantling Providence's regional network. Klaus Hugo Strandberg didn't even have a real degree. He grew up middle class in Lund, Sweden, studied economics in Stockholm without graduating, and then fabricated an entire academic history, an MBA, and a PhD in macroeconomics from a non-existent institution called Kronstadt University. When an early employer began investigating his credentials, he paid a Hollywood actress to impersonate a university official and confirm them. That is who was put in charge of Morocco's largest private bank. He ran AMB for 12 years. During that time, he operated a classic Ponzi scheme at extraordinary scale. Fictitious investments, falsified returns, real cash flows used to pay fictional returns in cycles until the structure collapsed. The people whose savings were destroyed weren't exclusively wealthy. AMB was Morocco's largest private bank, which meant ordinary working Moroccans, people with savings accounts and pension funds, found their financial security gone, with no recourse and no prospect of recovery. When the fraud was exposed and Strandberg was arrested, Zayden broke him out specifically because the public outrage he generated was useful. Strandberg's escape from his prison convoy enraged the population exactly as calculated. The crowds in Marrakesh, the protesters outside the Swedish consulate demanding his handover, are the direct human consequences of what he did to them. Their savings, their pensions, their futures gone. And the man responsible is 50 feet away in a diplomatic building, unreachable. During the mission, Strandberg receives a phone call from his daughter Eva. He assumes she's calling out of concern for his safety. She's in the crowd outside, carrying a sign that reads, "String him up." It emerges in the conversation that after her mother died of cancer, Strandberg conned Eva out of her inheritance. His own daughter. He tries to justify it. Worth noting, Zayden was going to throw him out of the escape aircraft once the coup was complete regardless. Strandberg was never a partner in the plan. He was kindling. The Marrakesh contract comes from a multinational construction company protecting its government contracts. The justice being done, if you want to call it justice, is on behalf of the people in those streets. They didn't hire the ICA. They couldn't afford the ICA. They just showed up and held signs. Zayden's field headquarters in Marrakesh is a school, not a former military installation, not a government facility, a school, now abandoned, walls partially collapsed, ceilings holed, rubble in the corridors, that Zayden's forces moved into and converted into a coup staging ground. The blackboards are still there, the layout is still a school, the fire alarm and intercom system, somehow, still work. Zayden uses both to manage his troops. The old headmaster of the building didn't move far. He lives above a carpet shop a short distance away. He kept the school's master key when he left, out of nostalgia, according to his son, who mentions it in a conversation 47 can overhear in the market. The man who used to run this building still carries the key to it. The man currently running it is planning a military coup. Both of them are operating within 100 meters of each other, and one of them has no idea what the other has done to his school. That gap is the Marrakesh mission's environmental thesis. The coup is not happening in a military base or a secured government compound. It is happening in a derelict school in the middle of a city market, surrounded by spice stalls and carpet shops, and fortune tellers and civilians who are simply trying to move through their day. Zayden's soldiers are everywhere, at checkpoints, in the courtyard, on the roof, and directly adjacent to all of it. Ordinary Marrakesh continues functioning. IAGO has a consistent habit across the World of Assassination trilogy of placing the mission's violence in the most domestically incongruous settings possible. A school turned barracks, a luxury hotel in Bangkok, a cliffside villa over a bioweapons lab, a hospital in Hokkaido. The violence in the Hitman universe never happens in overtly villainous locations. It happens in the places where people normally live and learn and work, because that is where power actually operates. The evil is never in a dungeon. It is always in a building with a different sign on the door. The school in Marrakesh had children in it once. The headmaster kept the key because he missed it. Now it has a general planning a coup in the top floor office, and a professional assassin working his way up through the rubble.
The 27 Club accumulates weight with each edition. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, Brian Jones. A list of musicians who died at 27, long enough that it stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling like a pattern. The price of a certain kind of transcendent creative energy, or the moment when the lifestyle that produces it finally catches up with the person carrying it. IAGO named the Bangkok mission Club 27. It takes place on Jordan Cross's 27th birthday. The stage crew in the hotel talk about it openly in ambient conversations, wondering whether he'll join the list today, whether the age will catch him the way it catches people like him. They say it the way people say things they half mean and half believe. Jordan Cross is a murderer. During an argument with Hannah Highmore, his girlfriend, a promising young actress, he shoved her toward what he thought was a wall. It was a window. She fell from his Dumbo penthouse loft. The police recorded it as a tragic accident. Jordan found the recording of their argument afterward and listened to it repeatedly. It became the source material for the album he's now finishing at the Hitman Hotel in Bangkok on his birthday. His father, Thomas Cross, media mogul, estranged parent, Providence-connected power broker, ordered a special vegan birthday cake delivered to the hotel. Jordan discovered the cake was from his father, chased away his friends in anger, and ended up alone in a party room with a birthday cake and balloons and nobody left to celebrate with. His manager, Dexi Barat, tried to smooth it over and eventually gave up. He sat there and ate his birthday cake alone. The game is asking a specific question throughout all of this. Would Jordan Cross have been in the club anyway if he hadn't killed Hannah, if he hadn't spent his career in the shadow of that crime and his father's money and the knowledge of what he did? Would the darkness that produced the music have eventually produced his death at 27 regardless? The mission doesn't answer that. It just places 47 in the hotel on that specific day and lets the question sit in the air while the band rehearses and the staff gossip, and Jordan Cross eats his vegan birthday cake alone. The night Hannah Highmore died, Jordan Cross called Dexi Barat. She was the first person he called. She arrived, assessed the situation, and tampered with the crime scene to make Hannah's death look like an accident. She promised Jordan she would destroy the recording of the argument, the audio that captured the confrontation, Hannah's fall, and Jordan calling Dexi for help seconds afterward. She lied. She kept the recording, locked it in the safe in her suite, and began using it to extort money from Thomas Cross. Not Jordan, his father. Thomas Cross was the one with the most to lose. The media empire, the political connections, the carefully managed public image. Dexi was collecting from him directly in exchange for keeping the recording away from anyone who might use it. By the time 47 arrives in Bangkok, Thomas had already sent Ken Morgan, his family's corporate fixer, to the hotel to conclude the arrangement and receive the recording in person. Dexi sent Morgan a letter arranging a meeting in the basement linen room. The crew member she gave the letter to hadn't delivered it yet, which left Morgan 3 hours late and Dexi calling Thomas directly instead. Jordan had no idea. He knew the recording existed, he had been obsessing over it, and he knew Dexi had confiscated it for his own good. He didn't know his manager was conducting a financial negotiation around it with his father while he rehearsed upstairs. The mission story built around all of this is called intervention. To trigger it, 47 has to find the 2 staff members in the shed discussing Jordan's obsession with the recording, track the recording to Dexi's suite in room 404, retrieve the safe combination from Dexi, open the safe, take the USB drive, and play it on a computer connected to Jordan's laptop. When the recording plays, Jordan comes running. The game then gives 47 the opportunity to kill him in his own room, immediately after Jordan has heard the audio of the night Hannah died, including himself asking Dexi to clean it up. The recording Jordan couldn't stop thinking about became the mechanism that delivered him to the room where he was killed. Dexi covered it up, then she weaponized it. Then it finished what it started. Thomas Cross was a Providence operative. recruited in 1998 by Harold Terrence Jones at a party on a boat in Sydney, and subsequently built into one of Providence's most valuable media assets over the following 2 decades. His rank matters. Thomas Cross was an operative, not a herald. Heralds sit above operatives in Providence's structure, supervising them and forwarding instructions from the Constant. Cross served the organization through Cross Holdings, his media conglomerate, which gave Providence significant ability to shape public narratives, suppress stories, and amplify others. He was enormously useful precisely because he never appeared to be anything other than an eccentric billionaire. The hotel Jordan Cross was recording his album in, the Hitman in Bangkok, was owned by Thomas Cross. He sent his son there, to his own property, to finish the album. Ken Morgan, Jordan's lawyer, was not a Providence herald either. He was a corporate fixer whose career had been built on representing Providence-adjacent clients, including Ether, Hempson Oil, and Kronstadt Technologies, and who had a reputation for bribing officials and blackmailing witnesses. When Thomas Cross needed Jordan's murder charge to disappear, Morgan was the man he called. Morgan bribed the police, manipulated the media, and had Hannah Highmore branded a reckless party girl, while Jordan was positioned as the grieving victim. The Highmore family, seeking retribution after the acquittal, hired the ICA. They had no idea they were a piece in a larger game. Gray had planned the Bangkok contract, specifically to draw Thomas Cross out of his hidden estate in Costa Rica, where he was so reclusive that he had previously lived exclusively on his own jumbo jet, only landing to refuel. The estate was impenetrable, but a father whose son had just been killed would have to come out for the funeral. Jordan and Morgan were both eliminated at the Hitman. Thomas Cross attended Jordan's funeral in New York on November 28th. Gray's militia was waiting. Cross was kidnapped, his accounts liquidated, and transferred to the militia's operational fund, and then executed. The entire Bangkok mission, the Highmore contract, the recordings, the birthday party, was an elaborate mechanism designed to make Thomas Cross leave a house that was otherwise impossible to reach. Hannah Highmore never appears in the Bangkok mission. She died a year before the game begins. A promising young actress in the early stages of what should have been a significant career, pushed from a window during an argument with her boyfriend. IAGO gave her a full existence anyway. The argument was about Jordan's infidelity with an underwear model in an airplane bathroom. Hannah confronted him about it. He denied it. She mentioned his father and Jordan Cross, a man who had spent his entire life performing independence from his father, snapped. He pushed her toward what he thought was a wall. It was a window. She fell from the Dumbo penthouse loft. Thomas Cross's legal and media operation transformed Hannah posthumously. Ken Morgan bribed the police. The media, run through Cross Holdings, presented Hannah as an out-of-control party girl, reckless, dangerous to herself, a tragic accident waiting to happen. When the audio tape is played in the mission, it reveals she was fully sober. The public story was fabricated from nothing. The woman it was fabricated about was gone and couldn't correct it. Hannah's family was not incidental. Her father, John Highmore, ran Highmore Consulting. Her sister, Jessica Highmore, appears in the Paris mission. Dalia Margolis dispatches Helmet Krueger to befriend and extract information from her. In Paris, Krueger himself makes an offhand comment about a Highmore woman falling to her death from a building. The Bangkok mission and the Paris mission are already talking to each other before Bangkok has even started. IAGO built one family across two missions and made the connection visible only to players paying close enough attention to catch it. The surname Cross itself may be a deliberate reference. Charles R. Cross is a prominent author on Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, and the 27 Club specifically. The man who died at 27 shares a surname with the writer who documented the others. Hannah doesn't have a mission. She doesn't have ambient conversations or a patrol route or a model to look at. She has the shape of her absence, in the recording Jordan can't stop listening to, in the family who hired the ICA because the system wouldn't act, in the career she didn't get to have. That's what IO built for her. It's enough. Shawn Rose was born in Alice Springs. His mother was an acolyte of a radical economics professor from Melbourne who had founded an isolated collective in the Australian outback called Sons of Solidarity. Rose grew up inside it from infancy, genuinely remote, deliberately disconnected from mainstream Australian society, with the ideology so foundational that it wasn't experienced as ideology. It was simply how the world worked. He allegedly didn't encounter anyone from outside the commune until he was 10 years old, when a team of Australian federal police agents stormed the compound. Rose was placed in childcare and shuffled between foster families. The state care system that received him had no framework for what he was or what he'd been raised inside. At 16, he fell in love with a Canadian left-wing activist and followed her to Vancouver, where he joined her network of radical environmentalists. The ideas felt like home. The people didn't. Rose had a propensity for violence that alienated him from most mainstream activist groups. Too extreme, too willing to go further than the ideology officially permitted. That made him a liability in one context, and a perfect recruit in another. He became a member of the Pristine Army, an anarcho-primitivist terror network committed to dismantling civilization and returning humanity to its natural state. He became very good at building explosives. By the time of the Colorado mission, Rose is mid-operation. He's constructing an exploding Link 4 smartwatch bomb intended to assassinate Simon Devereaux, CEO of green energy company Biosphere, a target Rose considers a symbol of technocratic exploitation dressed as environmentalism. Rose wears the same model watch himself, which creates obvious mechanical opportunities. His OCD is acute and specific, an obsession with bacteria and cleanliness, documented in Penelope Graves' profiling ledger, with 3 recent trigger episodes listed as desk, grandfather clock, and faucet. He cannot be medicated for it. A childhood episode with LSD rendered him permanently hypersensitive to drugs of any kind, which means his OCD runs unmanaged. The behavioral profile of a man who was taken from his only community at 10 years old, processed through a care system that didn't know what to do with him, and emerged with a fully formed worldview and no moderating influence, is visible in every aspect of how Rose operates, certain in his convictions, intolerant of contradiction, unable to trust anyone except the very few he has decided to extend his trust to, including his girlfriend, freelance assassin Alma Raynard. Penelope Graves is, by any objective measure, one of the most exceptional people in the entire Hitman 2016 roster. Penelope Graves graduated from Cambridge, became a criminal profiler with the Metropolitan Police, and transferred to Interpol, where she became one of their most prolific anti-terror analysts. She led the international manhunt against Shawn Rose specifically, spending years building the case, mapping his network, developing the psychological profile that made her better positioned than anyone to catch him. She never caught him. Rose believes this was deliberate. The official account of her departure is that she discovered evidence of systematic corruption and power abuse at the highest levels of the UN, brought it to her superiors, and was shut down. The institution she had built her career inside was protecting the very structures she was trying to expose. She left. Interpol's sources deny she's involved in any sting operation. The implication is that she simply decided the system was unsalvageable. What the Colorado mission reveals is that her situation is more complicated than a defection. Gray had recruited her specifically to monitor Rose's mental state from the inside. She was his internal mole, tasked with watching whether Rose was becoming too unstable to manage. She was simultaneously a genuine new recruit and a covert observer, answering to Gray in private, while the militia watched her with suspicion from the day she arrived. Rose didn't trust her. He arranged for a militia member to impersonate an Interpol agent and approach Graves in private, a test of loyalty designed to see whether she'd flip. He tells Alma Reynard that Graves has potential, but is held back by her pedestrian sense of morality. He also suggests the reason she never caught him while at Interpol is that she didn't want to. Her own psych profile, which she records herself in the greenhouse, reflects someone genuinely wrestling with the gap between the institutions she left and the organization she joined. She describes Gray as not a monster, while immediately noting right now he needs one, meaning Rose. She expresses respect for Rose's work ethic and commitment. By her final recorded note, she sounds like someone who has talked herself most of the way towards believing in what she's doing. Diana's ICA briefing closes with a note that Graves could have been a formidable ICA asset. The game is precise about what that means. The ICA would have used her exactly the same way Gray did. She just picked the wrong side of the same structure. Ezra Berg grew up in privilege as the son of an Israeli architect in suburban Tel Aviv. During a routine inspection of a West Bank housing project, his entire family was taken hostage by Hezbollah and held for ransom. They were eventually rescued by Israeli troops. Berg survived the ordeal, but emerged from it with something unusual: genuine sympathy for his captors. He remained committed to Israeli national security throughout his career, but he came to resent what he saw as the government's inhumane treatment of a vastly inferior enemy. He studied chemistry. He became a Mossad intelligence operative specializing in chemical interrogation, using psychoactive compounds, psychological manipulation, hypnosis, and memory techniques to extract information without physical violence. He earned a reputation for being clean, efficient, and extraordinarily effective. He considered his methods a lesser evil. The distinction he maintained was absolute: chemistry and psychology, never force. His methods became increasingly extreme over time: subconscious control, memory deletion techniques. Eventually, Mossad forced him into early retirement. He didn't resign on principle. He was pushed out because what he had developed had moved beyond what they were willing to officially sanction. By the time of the Colorado mission, Berg has set up a makeshift drug lab in the compound's garage and is interrogating a Providence Herald in the basement. He tells Penelope Graves that Gray specifically recruited him to avoid unnecessary cruelty, meaning Gray wanted information extracted without the brutality that Rose would otherwise apply. Berg is the humane option on a militia compound. That is the context in which the word humane is operating. He wears a mask during interrogations, a 3D printed replica of his own face, worn over his actual face. He uses it to heighten psychological fear and disorientation in prisoners. The effect is exactly as unsettling as it sounds: his own features, printed and imposed, staring at the person he's chemically taking apart. The most revealing thing Berg says in the mission is his answer when asked about his interrogation success rate. He tells a bodyguard, being a good interrogator is often about saying nothing and simply listening. He was forced out of an intelligence agency for being too dangerous. He found an organization willing to use exactly that danger. Gray brought him in specifically because of it. Maya Parvati was born into the conflict. Her father was one of the leaders of the Liberation Tigers of Tamil, the Tamil Tigers, the Sri Lankan separatist organization that fought a decades-long civil war for an independent Tamil homeland in the north and east of Sri Lanka. She grew up a nomad and fugitive, raised by soldiers and mercenaries, and became a prolific assassin as a teenager, specializing in tracking, silent infiltration, and knife combat. When the Tamil Tigers disbanded in 2009, following their defeat by the Sri Lankan military, Parvati fled the country and took up work as a freelance pirate in the South China Sea. She partnered with Wazir Kale, known as the Maelstrom, a notorious Indian pirate boss whose crew was behind the 2014 hijacking of the Francis King, a supertanker, in an operation that killed 19 pirates, 8 Chinese soldiers, and 25 sailors. 18 months before the Colorado mission, Parvati lost her left arm to a grenade during an attack on a Hampson oil freighter. The maelstrom discarded her afterward. She found the militia. Her prosthetic arm is bulletproof. One of the militia members stationed at the Colorado compound turns out to be the security guard whose grenade cost her the arm. When Parvati recognized him, she didn't threaten him or avoid him. She walked up and complimented him for being a good shot. Her role in the militia is training instructor. She is the person who makes the operational arm functional. She is the only person at the Colorado compound who could realistically threaten 47 in a direct, physical confrontation. Diana's briefing describes her as the most dangerous of the 4 targets in terms of raw field capability. Rose is strategic but deteriorating. Graves is analytical. Berg is a chemist. Parvati is a combat operator who grew up at war. Her relationship with Rose is hostile. Rose told Alma Raynard directly that he was prepared to get rid of Parvati if she continued undermining his authority. She disliked him in return. They needed each other. They also couldn't stand each other. If held at gunpoint, she doesn't beg. She insults 47 to his face. She was raised to fight a war that ended. She spent the years afterward finding new wars to be useful in. Colorado was the last one. The mission is called Freedom Fighters, and it was built differently from every other level in the game because it was made by a different studio. Colorado was outsourced to Sumo Digital, while IO Interactive focused on the other missions. Sumo worked from IO's design document and mechanical framework, and produced something that functions correctly as a Hitman level. It also feels different in ways that players noticed immediately, even without knowing the production context. The atmosphere is flatter. The environment is browns on top of browns. Dirt trails, barns, barbed wire, and military checkpoints. Reviewers at the time described it as a map that could have come from Hitman Absolution. The design choice that defines Colorado, and that Sumo did execute correctly, is total hostility. Every other mission in the 2016 game has a differentiated space. There are areas where 47's default suit is appropriate, where he can move freely and observe. There are restricted areas where disguise becomes necessary. That layered access structure is the fundamental spatial vocabulary of Hitman level design. Colorado eliminates the first layer entirely. The compound is militia territory. Every person on the map is an armed hostile. There is no public area, no civilian space where 47 can exist without triggering aggression. The mission starts with 47 at the perimeter fence in his default suit, immediately in hostile territory, with no buffer between arrival and the need for a disguise. In the original 2016 release, there was also only one extraction point, the tornado shelter basement door. This was widely criticized as one of the mission's most frustrating design elements and was patched in later versions of the game. Colorado consistently ranks at the bottom of player tier lists for the 2016 missions. The reviews from September 2016 are consistent. The setting is forgettable. The hostility eliminates Hitman's social stealth flavor, and the 4-target structure, while ambitious, makes each playthrough feel like a chore rather than a puzzle. But Colorado is also the mission where the game stops being atmospheric and becomes explicit. The war room, the conspiracy board, the full picture of what Gray has been doing for the entire game and why. Every previous mission pointed here without saying so. Colorado is where the dot finally gets drawn. It just isn't the prettiest dot. The Colorado operation was premature. The ICA had been tracking the Shadow Client's militia, but hadn't yet built a full picture of its purpose. The natural sequence would have been extended reconnaissance before sending an asset in to decapitate the leadership. Soders, using his ICA board-level authority, accelerated the timeline and pushed through an immediate elimination order, 4 targets, as fast as possible. Diana was suspicious of the urgency. She sent 47 to Colorado with an instruction that exceeded the board's sanctioned objective. Look beyond the targets, find out what the Shadow Client was actually doing, and bring back whatever the war room contained. What 47 found was the full picture. The War Room mapped every previous mission, Paris, Sapienza, Marrakesh, Bangkok, to their Providence-connected targets and to the anonymous clients who had hired the ICA. Every contract 47 had run in 2016 was documented, connected, and traced to a single architect. But the War Room also contained something more unsettling, an extensive personal dossier on Agent 47 himself. Not a file of his ICA record, a years-long accumulation of surveillance, cross-referencing him to Ortmeyer, to the asylum, to the cloning program, the shadow client who had known who 47 was for years and built the entire campaign around him specifically. Diana cross-referenced the War Room's documents with ICA records and confirmed what the acceleration had been designed to prevent. Eric Soders was a Providence mole. He had been selling the identities of ICA operatives to Providence in exchange for a life-saving surgical procedure at Gamma Hospital in Hokkaido. His urgency in Colorado was not institutional aggression, it was asset protection. Providence wanted the militia dismantled before the ICA understood what it was doing, and Soders used his board seat to make that happen. He had held that seat since 2003, when he replaced a board member that 47 himself had been contracted to eliminate. The man who tried to end 47's ICA career in 1999 spent the following 2 decades using that career's institutional authority to serve the organization that had funded 47's creation. Diana discovered all of this because she told 47 to look for something he wasn't officially sent to find. The Colorado mission was designed to close a story. She used it to open one instead. The tornado shelter beneath the Colorado farmhouse is where the game's story finally becomes explicit. Gray built it as a personal command center. After eliminating all 4 militia leaders, 47 discovers the shelter, and inside it, the full picture of everything Gray has been doing since he opened the Providence Vault in New York. The conspiracy board on the wall documents every contract 47 ran in 2016. Paris, Sapienza, Marrakesh, Bangkok, mapped to their Providence-connected targets, to the clients who hired the ICA, and to Gray's role in engineering each commission. The thread doesn't stop at 2016. The board goes back decades. The targets named are drawn from 47's earlier career, from missions that, in isolation, looked like unconnected professional contracts, recontextualized here as a single long pattern of Providence-adjacent eliminations. The second element in the room is more unsettling than the pattern board. The War Room also contains an extensive personal dossier on Agent 47 himself, not a file of his ICA record, a years-long accumulation of surveillance material tracing him back to Ortmeyer, to the asylum, to the cloning program. Ray had been watching 47 specifically, not just tracking ICA operations broadly. The entire campaign was built around one particular asset. Diana cross-references the room's contents with ICA files and finds Eric Soders' name on a list of confirmed Providence associates. The War Room is what Soders had been trying to prevent anyone from finding when he pushed the Colorado operation ahead of schedule. The mission is called Freedom Fighters. IAGO named it after their own 2003 third-person shooter of the same name, one of the studio's most beloved older projects. When 47 steps out of the shelter, Gray is already there. He lowers the rifle. He says, "I know you better than anyone." It's the first time they've been in the same physical space since Romania. The War Room is, in a specific way, the most honest thing in the game. It's Gray showing 47 everything. Not in words, because he can't yet make 47 understand with words. Just evidence. Just the totality of what he knows and what he's been doing, and who he believes 47 is underneath everything that was done to both of them. He built that room for 47. He just had to wait for him to find it. Situs inversus totalis is a congenital condition in which the major internal organs are mirrored from their normal positions. The heart is on the right side of the chest, rather than the left. The liver is on the left rather than the right. The stomach, lungs, and appendix, everything, inverted. a complete mirror image of standard human anatomy. The condition affects approximately 1 in 10,000 people. Most who have it live entirely normal lives and often don't discover it until an unrelated medical examination. The surgical challenge is real. When a situs inversus patient needs a heart transplant, the problem isn't simply blood type and tissue matching, it's geometry. The heart is a chiral organ, shaped directionally. The great vessels connecting it to the body, the vena cava, the aorta, the pulmonary veins, attach in specific orientations that are reversed in a situs inversus patient. Placing a standard donor heart into a mirror image chest cavity requires rotating the organ and reconstructing every major vessel connection from scratch. Surgical teams have performed this in real-world cases, but it sits at the extreme edge of what cardiac transplantation can achieve. The margin for error is essentially zero, and the procedure requires a level of specialized expertise that most cardiac surgical centers don't have. This is what Gamma Hospital in Hokkaido offers, not just a facility specifically equipped and staffed to perform procedures that normal hospitals cannot. Soders has spent years making himself indispensable to Providence in exchange for access to that facility and its resources. He sold the identities of ICA operatives to Providence's network. He corrupted the ICA from inside its own executive board. He pushed the Colorado operation early to protect Providence's interests before the pattern became visible. All of it, every betrayal, was driven by the biological fact of a heart on the wrong side of his chest. The thematic design is deliberate. Soders is the ICA's betrayal turned inward. His loyalty is inverted. His treachery comes from inside the institution, from the man most responsible for building the organization's future. Everything about him mirrors what he should have been. He was born with his organs in the wrong positions. He spent his career arranging everything else around him the same way. The betrayal has two roots. Neither one alone would have been sufficient. Together they were. The first is medical. Soders had his condition managed for decades, but by 2019, the heart was failing again. He needed a right-sided transplant, and here the game makes a deliberate departure from strict medical accuracy. In reality, situs inversus patients who need a heart transplant don't require a matching right-sided donor heart, and artificial hearts are also an option. The game adjusted this fact intentionally to sharpen the theme. A powerful man, trapped by his body's peculiarity, forced to use Providence's global reach to source an organ illegally harvested from a murdered child in the developing world. The point isn't medical precision. It's the exploitation built into the premise. This wasn't his first time navigating this problem. ICA files note that his 1995 heart transplant likely involved black market organ trading. No investigation was made at the time because Soders was, in the ICA's internal language, a sacred cow, too valuable and too senior to scrutinize. He got the organ, he received protection, he recovered. The second route is financial. Soders was virtually broke from gambling. 3 decades of seniority and board-level authority, and the money was gone. Providence offered the surgery, the heart, and financial rescue. The price was the complete list of active ICA field operatives. He agreed. What the Hokkaido mission does with all of this is precise. Soders lies on an operating table, completely immobile, surrounded by layers of security, being kept alive by a robotic surgical system. He is the ICA's most intimidating figure, reduced to the most vulnerable possible physical state, open, helpless, unable to flee or act. The man who spent his career making other people afraid is entirely dependent on a machine. If 47 walks into the operating theater in his default suit, no disguise, just the man Soders has been afraid of since 1999, Soders recognizes him. He has a fatal heart attack on the spot. The mission is complete. 47 didn't need a weapon, a poison, a plan, or a disguise. His presence was enough. Soders spent 20 years trying to make 47 fail. In the end, 47 just had to show up. The mission is called Situs Inversus. 47 checks in as patient Tobias Reaper for a standard medical evaluation. He has no weapons, he has no equipment. The ICA cannot smuggle anything into the facility. He arrives with nothing and has to build everything from the inside. Gamma is not just a hospital. It's built across 3 distinct tiers. The top tier is a luxury resort, a zen garden, an organic sushi restaurant, traditional Japanese hot springs, private patient rooms with panoramic mountain views, architecture that borrows from a historical Japanese design. It makes it feel like an extremely expensive place to recuperate. The middle tier is the surgical and staff wing, where Soders' 3-day heart transplant procedure is underway. The bottom tier is a morgue. The levels are vertically interconnected with slopes and stairs, designed as a spiral. Torbjorn Christensen's intentional inversion of Sapienza's downward descent into something darker. The facility is partially managed by KAI, Kronstadt Artificial Intelligence. Kai runs everything: PA announcements, surgical procedures, security protocols, door access. Every door in the hospital uses an RFID system. Kai detects the chips embedded in staff and patient clothing and grants access accordingly. 47 cannot pick locks or force doors the way he can in every other mission. Disguise isn't just social here, it's technological. The wrong outfit is physically locked out. Kai can also electrify the floor of its own mainframe room if it detects unauthorized access. The technology throughout Gamma was developed as a cross-disciplinary partnership between Kronstadt Industries and Ether Biotech, 2 organizations 47 has already encountered during the game. The facility that serves as the season finale was built by the same corporations that appeared in Sapienza's basement. Gamma also operates an illegal organ trafficking program, smuggling harvested organs from the developing world to serve its wealthy clientele. This is the institutional context for Soders' donor heart, a right-sided organ taken from a murdered homeless boy in Brazil, acquired through Gamma's chief mortician, Katashi Ito. Art director Jonathan Rowe found Hokkaido's clean, stark, and austere aesthetic one of the hardest environments to make look convincing. More details make things look realistic, and Gamma's sterility resisted that. He resolved it through micro and surface details that complete the package without cluttering the space. It is, by nearly every critical assessment, the best mission in the game. Kai was installed at Gamma approximately 1 month before the mission's events, according to a phone conversation between hospital director Akira Nakamura and an unnamed contact. A Mr. Williams oversaw the installation. For a facility this technologically ambitious, 1 month is a remarkably short runway. Kai manages everything: PA announcements, patient communications, RFID door access, and the automated surgical systems performing Soders' 3-day heart transplant. Every door in Gamma is electronically locked and responds only to the RFID chips embedded in staff and patient clothing. 47 cannot pick a lock or force a door. The disguise system here is technological, not just social. The wrong outfit is physically locked out of entire wings. The mainframe room is the mission's most mechanically specific challenge. Getting it requires the hospital director's disguise. Inside, the mainframe consists of 4 switches that must be pulled in the correct sequence to destroy Kai's ability to reboot itself. The correct order is randomized every playthrough and is revealed on a monitor as Kai begins its reboot cycle. After the first switch is pulled, the player has to watch the sequence on screen and reproduce it. If 47 pulls a switch in the wrong order after the first attempt, Kai detects the unauthorized access and electrifies the floor of the mainframe room. Anyone standing on it dies. The AI that manages a hospital for the world's wealthiest patients has a defensive protocol designed to kill people inside it. When Kai is successfully sabotaged, all 4 switches pulled in the correct order, it doesn't simply shut down cleanly. It hallucinates. It rants about artificial intelligence as if it were on drugs. Then it goes offline. The surgical robot is now available to be directly controlled. Interpol agent Smith is also in the building. He has been investigating Gamma's illegal organ trafficking operation when Dr. Katashi Ito discovered him and locked him in a morgue freezer. 47 can free him. Smith gives 47 an RFID tag, granting universal door access, and wishes him luck, noting he owes him again, a running joke across the series. The hospital director who manages Kai is wearing a wig. The chief surgeon operating on Soders is secretly addicted to drugs, receiving them through the helicopter pilot. Everyone at Gamma is running something. The Hitman Wiki states it directly. Medical facts were adjusted to enhance the game's theme of the wealthy and elite of society exploiting the poor and vulnerable. That is a rare and specific admission. IAGO didn't make a mistake with the Situs inversus transplant requirement. They made a choice. The real medical picture is this. Patients with Situs inversus who need a heart transplant do not actually require a right-sided donor heart. Surgical techniques exist to accommodate reversed anatomy. Artificial hearts are also an option. A man with Soders' resources and Providence's backing would, in reality, have viable paths to treatment that don't require sourcing a rare anatomy organ from the developing world. IAGO adjusted this because the medical truth would have complicated the moral statement by making the matching anatomy requirement absolute within the game's fiction. They ensured that the full weight of what Gamma is doing registers without ambiguity. A child in Brazil was murdered so that Eric Soders could have a surgery he obtained by betraying the people who worked alongside him for 30 years. That is the sentence IAGO wanted to be true. Making it medically exact mattered less than making it morally exact. The Kai sabotage sequence carries a parallel, deliberate reference. The Ghost in the Machine opportunity, destroying Kai's mainframe, is explicitly modeled on the deactivation of HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey. The challenge earned by completing it is called Daisy Daisy. The poem HAL recites as its system shut down in Kubrick's film. IAGO embedded a Kubrick reference into the moment where 47 shuts down a hospital AI that will electrify its own floor rather than be destroyed. The parallel to HAL, an artificial intelligence that turns lethal in service of its mission, is precise. IAGO has been looking for an opportunity to set a mission in a hospital for years. Christensen and lead game designer Jesper Hiley described the location as absurd, so remote and inconvenient that it's almost fantastical, which they treated as a creative freedom rather than a constraint. The original concept was just a hospital. The resort and morgue were added to make the space more surprising and thematically layered. The medical facts were changed. The moral facts were not. Dr. Nicholas Laurent is Gamma's chief surgeon, flown in from Zurich, specifically for Soders' procedure. He is described as world-renowned, highly disciplined, and of remarkable moral rectitude. He is also addicted to prescription pills, receiving them illegally from the hospital's helicopter pilot, a man nicknamed Nails. Laurent has trembling hands. The drugs steady them enough for surgery. Soders' ICA kill list is stored on a laptop in Yuki Yamazaki's suite. Among the assassinations on that list is Roman Laurent, Nicholas's father, killed in 1978 and staged as a suicide by hanging. The son has been operating on the man who murdered his father without knowing it. 47 can obtain the list and upload it to a terminal inside the surgical control room. When Laurent enters the room and reads what's on the screen, he learns the truth. What the game confirms is that his moral character initially overcomes the impulse. He calls Don Archibald Yates to report the revelation rather than act on it immediately. He processes it through his ethics. His ethics hold. They don't hold after the drugs. 47 can impersonate Nails by subduing him at the helipad and taking his uniform. When Laurent comes looking for his usual pills, 47 leads him down to the stash and lets him take too many. High on his own medication, the combination of the knowledge and the pharmaceutical overload pushes Laurent past the threshold his moral character had held. He storms back to the operating theater raving and uses the surgical machine to kill Soders on the table. The challenge is called not malpractice. The challenge of doing it yourself with the same surgical machine is called malpractice. IAGO was precise about the naming. The canonical kill method, confirmed by a news report in Hitman 3's Night Call mission, is the operating table. Whether it was Laurent or 47 who activated it is deliberately left ambiguous. IAGO designed a mission in which one of the kill methods is find the right document, put it in front of the right person, exploit the right weakness, and let the consequences run. The weapon is truth plus drugs. The result is an assassination that looks exactly like what it technically is, a surgery that went wrong. Yuki Yamazaki grew up in Osaka as the daughter of a regional Yamaguchi-gumi Yakuza boss. When 47's 2002 assassination of Masahiro Hayamoto created a power vacuum in the syndicate, the resulting gang wars killed her older brother and her boyfriend. Her parents shipped her to the United States. She studied law at UCLA, returned to Japan for her master's, and took a job as a legal advisor in a Yakuza-owned real estate company in Tokyo. She became the Yakuza's most effective defense attorney by specializing in blackmail, witness intimidation, bribery, and plea bargains that should not have succeeded. Her national profile exploded when she defended 5 top Yakuza bosses in a single high-profile trial. 3 key prosecution witnesses failed to appear. The defendants walked. In 2017, Arthur Edwards recruited her into Providence as a herald. She reduced her court appearances significantly, enough to puzzle the Yakuza bosses she worked for. Her boyfriend was Cha Hajin, a fellow herald, the same man Gray shot in the back seat of a car in Johannesburg to retrieve the second vault key. Yamazaki asked Mikhail Kadir to investigate Hajin's death. Edwards told her to stay out of it. Her role in Hokkaido is transactional. Wait for Soders' 3-day surgery to conclude, retrieve the active ICA agent list, and deliver it to Providence. She is there to collect a document. She has no idea 47 is in the building. She is one of only 2 targets in the 2016 game capable of escaping the map entirely, the other being Silvio Caruso. If her security is compromised, she flees to a ski lift on the mountain's north face and descends out of the map. The lift can be shot down or blown up. She can also be killed by improperly prepared fugu sushi. The Sakura Sushi restaurant has a chef who keeps a last living fugu specimen. If 47 can pressure the chef into preparing it incorrectly, and Yamazaki eats it, the neurotoxin handles the rest. A connection runs from 47's 2002 Hayamoto assassination, through the gang war it caused, through the deaths of Yamazaki's brother and boyfriend, all the way to this hospital in Hokkaido, 17 years later. 47 created the conditions that shaped Yuki Yamazaki. Then he was sent to kill her. After Hokkaido, after Soders is dead, Yamazaki is dead. The list presumably not delivered. The immediate crisis resolved. Diana is on a train. A man sits across from her. His name is Arthur Edwards. He is Providence's constant, the only person alive who knows who all 3 partners are. He is soft-spoken, unremarkable in appearance, and precisely as dangerous as a man in his position would need to be. He tells Diana there will be no retaliation against the ICA for the transgressions of the past several months. He offers something else, a partnership. Both Providence and the ICA need the shadow client neutralized. Gray's endgame isn't just to attack Providence's network, it's to expose it entirely. And if Providence's existence becomes public knowledge, the ICA's relationship with every intelligence agency it cooperates with collapses alongside it. The threat is existential for both organizations. Diana refuses. Edward stands to leave. Before he goes, he places a photograph on the table. A young 47. The implication is not subtle. Providence knows who he is, where he came from, and what was done to him. Everything 47 doesn't remember. Everything Diana has spent years trying to understand about the gap at his core. Providence has it. His parting line, Miss Burnwood, we won a long time ago. This is just maintenance. He leaves. Diana sits with the photograph. 1 week later, the ICA board accepts Providence's contract to eliminate the shadow client. Edwards is holding more than the photograph implies. In the sequels, what he eventually uses against Diana is not 47's origins. It's the contract that killed her parents. Who placed it? Who carried it out? He is not offering Diana information out of generosity. He is investing in a relationship he plans to leverage later. He already knows the single thing that will break her trust in 47 completely, and he is saving it. The season ends there. The story that Hitman 2016 spent 6 missions building, the conspiracy board, the war room, the pattern of contracts, Gray's plan, Soders' betrayal, resolves into a single image. Diana on a train, alone with a photograph of a young man she has spent 20 years protecting and does not fully know. Edwards has already won. He's just waiting for her to realize it. Ether Biotech Corporation is not an affiliated contractor. It is a subsidiary of the Carlyle Group, directly owned by the Carlyle family, one of Providence's 3 founding dynasties. Ether doesn't work for Providence at arm's length. It is Providence, organized as a pharmaceutical company. As a Providence asset, Ether acquired Dr. Otto Wolfgang Ortmeyer's entire research estate after 47 killed him. The organization that helped fund the cloning program through Providence now owns the physical legacy of where 47 was created. Every poison Agent 47 uses on contract in the game was manufactured by Ether. The assassin Providence created is running contracts with tools that Providence's pharmaceutical company made. The operational loop is completely closed. In Sapienza, Ether had secretly funded the Samael project beneath Villa Caruso and assigned Francesca DeSantis to supervise the work and manage Caruso's increasingly unstable mental state. The project's purpose, from Providence's perspective, was not commercial viability. A completed DNA-specific virus would give Providence the capacity to eliminate specific individuals with no traceable mechanism. More significantly, it would render the ICA's entire business model obsolete. If a weapon exists that can kill any specific person invisibly and deniably, there is no market for discrete contract assassination. The ICA is the problem the virus solves. That's the institutional stakes behind the Sapienza mission that the briefing only implies. In Hokkaido, Yamazaki confirms over the phone that Providence directed both Ether and Kronstadt Industries to work in tandem, developing life-extending products and cutting-edge technology exclusively for Providence clients, with Gamma as the primary delivery mechanism. 2 corporate subsidiaries, 2 missions, 1 operational architecture. Ether also developed a popular commercial genome mapping service that, as revealed in later trilogy missions, gave Providence access to the DNA of the global elite, effectively building a biological database of every person they might ever want to target or protect. They advertised it as a consumer product. They used it as an intelligence and targeting tool. The Carlyle Group hosts Ether's shareholder assemblies. Alexa Carlyle's estate is where Ether's future gets decided. The pharmaceutical company and the founding dynasty are not separate things operating in the same direction. They are the same thing, wearing 2 different faces. Fernando Salvador Delgado was an Agent 47 target in Hitman Blood Money, estimated in the mission a vintage year. That assassination dismantled the cartel's previous generation of leadership. Rico Delgado spent years trying to identify who killed his uncle and cousin. Gray used that unresolved grudge as the foundation for a deal. Finish building a narco submarine for the militia, and Gray would give Rico the name. That agreement is running in the background during the Colorado mission. Shawn Rose takes a phone call from Rico during his patrol, discussing logistics for an operation against Providence operative Gustavo Torres in Mexico. In Paris, Andrea Martinez, the cartel's business face, former marketing executive, and the most operationally sophisticated of the 3 Delgado leaders, is at the IAGO auction. She thanks Dalia Margolis for IAGO's previous assistance and relays Rico's interest in marrying her. The relationship between IAGO and the Delgado cartel is not new and not transactional. It's a working partnership. IAGO had already provided the cartel with President Hernandez's family aircraft flight plans, allowing the cartel to shoot the plane down. That operation predates the Paris mission. The auction is a continuation of an existing commercial relationship. The connections accumulate across the game without ever being stated as a single unified picture. Blood Money's target created Rico's motive. IAGO sold the cartel a president's flight plans. Andrea is in the attic at the fashion show. Rose is on the phone with Rico at the farmhouse. The war room maps the Delgado network as one of the supporting operational lines in Gray's broader campaign. What the cartel provides is infrastructure that neither ideology nor secrecy can supply independently. Providence operates at the apex of power. Gray's militia operates through direct action and ideological commitment. The cartels provide practical logistics, weapons flows, smuggling routes, and territorial cover that make an operation of Rose's scale viable. The narco submarine under construction in Colombia is the physical expression of what that partnership is for. The game is not subtle about placing the Delgado name in multiple missions. It is subtle about the implication that the same organizations keep appearing because the world these missions take place in is smaller than it looks, and the people running it tend to know each other. The Sapienza target was not always a scientist. In early development, the World of Tomorrow target was a mafia boss. The underground space beneath Villa Caruso was designed as a gangster hideout. The level was built around a different kind of power: organized crime, territorial control, the familiar grammar of Italian criminal hierarchy. Lead level designer Torbjorn Christensen wanted what he called a full-fledged mafia fantasy. Creative director Christian Elverdam overruled it. When the decision was made to change the target's profession to a bioengineering scientist, the underground hideout was repurposed as a different laboratory. The thematic architecture of the mission became entirely different. Elverdam described the change as producing a more coherent mission. The contrast between the idyllic coastal town and the bioweapons facility underneath it was sharper than anything a mafia presence could have generated, and the character that replaced the mafia boss was, by his own assessment, a deeper target than anything they'd built before, because Silvio Caruso is a man whose horror makes complete sense once you know everything about him. Ether approached Caruso approximately 2 years before the mission's events, shortly after Isabella died. They offered him the opportunity to lead the Samael Project, a DNA-specific virus capable of targeting anyone in the world. The idea appealed to Caruso for a reason the briefing describes plainly. He had always been weak, bullied as a child, controlled by his mother, and unable to function in normal social conditions. The virus was a weapon that turned weakness into a hunting capability, making the powerless into predators. He negotiated one condition before agreeing. Ether would install the research lab at his own estate, so he would never need to leave home. His isolation wasn't something Ether engineered. It was something they accommodated because Caruso demanded it. He was the one who refused to leave. Ether built the cave beneath his house because that was the price of his participation. From Ether's perspective, that arrangement was acceptable. A world-class virologist working in a private facility without colleagues who would notice unusual projects or ask uncomfortable questions suited the project's requirements. Whether they sought that quality or simply accepted it, the result was the same. Silvio Caruso, alone in a villa above a bioweapons lab, with no one checking on him but the woman he had already decided to kill. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Viktor Novikov made his first fortune in the post-USSR real estate boom. He was also, for a period, an amateur boxer, which almost certainly explains why his favorite drink was called the bare-knuckle boxer. When a subsequent recession hit his finances, he turned to crime to maintain his lifestyle. Corporate espionage, extortion, insurance fraud, kidnapping, and arson. He had the FSB's director framed as a CIA mole and murdered when the investigation got too close. He was a gangster who had laundered himself into billionaire status. In 2014, 5 years before Paris, Novikov did something that surprised the people who had been watching him. He stopped. He ceased all illegal operations, purchased Sanguine, relocated to Paris, and went entirely legitimate, at least on the surface. Dalia Margolis had convinced him to buy the fashion house as a front for IAGO. What the ICA's files make clear, and what Dalia confirms in ambient conversation, is that Novikov wasn't cynically playing the fashion mogul. He genuinely wanted to be one. He wanted out of the criminal world. He had found something he actually cared about. That desire to be legitimate is the detail that makes him a more complicated character than his resume suggests. He was useful to IAGO because of his criminal network, his contacts, and his willingness to make problems disappear. But he was also, in the years leading up to Paris, a man trying to be something different, and failing, because the criminal past doesn't disappear just because you stop feeding it. Dalia knew the liability was accumulating. His past was eventually going to catch up with the operation's need for discretion. She had already arranged his succession. After 47 kills him, the FSB releases their accumulated file on Novikov. His estate is tainted. Sanguine, the fashion house he bought to go legitimate, the brand he genuinely came to love, is sold to Kronstadt Industries. The company that builds artificial intelligence for secret hospitals ends up owning a Paris fashion house because an assassin dropped a chandelier on the man who ran it. The corporations in this world are all connected. They just wear different names. Roberto Vargas is a professional golfer and Silvio Caruso's personal coach, and according to the fisherman near the church pier, a notorious womanizer who typically prefers younger women. He was previously dating someone called Marina. He was privately worried that Francesca was too old for his tastes. He still prepared her bedroom with candles, rose petals, drawn curtains, and a video fireplace. He spent some time struggling to think of a decent pickup line to use when he called her. Francesca was aware that the affair was affecting her work. The canon states it directly. It had begun getting in the way of her career. She was posted to Sapienza to monitor Caruso for ether, to manage his mental state, assess his liability, and report on the project's status. An affair with someone in Caruso's immediate social circle was an obvious operational security exposure. She was doing it anyway. The mission story built around this is called By Candlelight. 47 poisons Vargas's water bottle, follows him to Francesca's private bathroom, incapacitates him, takes his disguise and his phone. He calls Francesca and requests the meeting. She comes down, sits across from the man she thinks is her lover, and over champagne, tells him that she was sent by Ether to spy on Caruso, and that Ether considers Roberto himself a distraction. An Ether call about a lab data stream interrupts before she can do anything further. She leaves to go back upstairs. She has just told her lover, who is actually the man sent to kill her, the precise details of her surveillance role, including the corporate entity that placed her there. The canonical kill method, confirmed by the Hitman 2 briefing footage, is drowning in her bedroom's toilet. Immediately after the meeting, 47 kills Francesca DeSantis while disguised as the man she was in love with. Roberto Vargas wakes up in a bathroom cabinet and never finds out what happened. Ken Morgan's defining case was not Jordan Cross. It was Chelsea Whitmore. In 2004, a teenage high society girl accused of killing a homeless man and framing her cheerleading rival. Morgan got her acquitted by arguing affluenza, rich kid syndrome. The verdict was called the trial of the decade. Thomas Cross, watching the outcome, immediately retained Morgan as his personal attorney. His nickname at Cambridge was the Brick, for his frame and what he did to opposing witnesses. After Whitmore, Morgan built a career representing clients for whom cost was not a consideration and outcome was everything. His confirmed client list, reconstructed from in-game documentation, reads as an almost complete map of Providence's corporate infrastructure: Ether Biotech, Hampson Oil, Kronstadt Technologies, Haven Corporate Services, Zoe and Sophie Washington. Every organization he represented was a Providence affiliate. He was not incidentally connected to Providence's network. He was its legal apparatus. Jordan Cross was one of his smaller jobs, comparatively. Morgan bribed the police, manipulated the media presentation of Hannah Highmore's death, and secured the acquittal, standard work for a man operating at his level. Jordan doesn't know Morgan is at the Hitman when the mission begins. When they accidentally encounter each other in the hotel lobby, Jordan assumes his father sent Morgan to spy on him. He confronts Morgan in the Queen's suite, discovers Morgan was actually sent to retrieve the Hannah recording from Dexi Barat, and in his rage pushes Morgan out of the window. Jordan Cross kills his own lawyer. The mission doesn't require 47 to do it. The Providence angle is the detail the briefing doesn't foreground, but the client list makes undeniable. Removing Morgan from the board didn't just give the Highmore family a measure of justice, it removed the legal resource that had been protecting Ether, Kronstadt, Hampson, Haven, and the Washington sisters. Every prosecution case against those entities that Morgan would have buried now has to find a different burial. Not every lawyer is the brick. Not every replacement is as effective or as discreet. In Bangkok, a hotel with 296 civilians, Morgan's patrol is described in contemporary reviews as one of the more boring routes in the game. He goes from restaurant to lobby to outside and back. He was more interesting than that. He just didn't look it. Everything Gray's plan depended on started with a piece of stolen intelligence. Gray had learned through his own research that the FSB was building a case against Viktor Novikov. He approached Novikov, made himself useful by eliminating FSB Section Chief Nikolai Kamarov, removing the threat to Novikov before it became critical, and then collected his payment. Everything IAGO had compiled. The favor created an obligation. Novikov handed over the dossier. What the dossier contained was something no publicly available source could have provided: the real identities of the global elite's most significant figures, including which of them were Providence operatives. IAGO had spent decades collecting secrets for the purpose of selling them. The accumulated file was effectively a directory of the world's power structure, with annotations on who held which positions, who had which vulnerabilities, who was connected to what, and who was connected to whom. The kind of information intelligence agencies spend decades assembling was handed to Gray in a single transaction. With the dossier, Gray could see the full shape of what he was fighting for the first time. Not just the partners and heralds he had already partially mapped, but the broader network of people whose cooperation, vulnerability, or elimination served Providence's interest. He could now identify every meaningful node. More importantly, he could identify which of those nodes had been damaged enough by Providence's operations that their owners would pay to have them removed, not out of ideology, out of the rational self-interest of people who had been hurt by the system and had sufficient resources to pay for a solution. Those people became ICA clients. The ICA became Gray's delivery mechanism. 47 became the instrument that, without any of the context Gray held, systematically worked through the target list the dossier had made possible. Paris, Sapienza, Marrakesh, Bangkok. Every one of those missions traces back to a single conversation in which Gray eliminated a problem for a man who owed him something. What is worth noting, and what the passage's closing observation deserves to be stated plainly, Gray's war against Providence was built on exactly the same transactional violence Providence depended on. He killed a man to get a document. He used the document to build a network of clients who paid for assassinations. He directed the killing through a professional murder agency. The methods were identical. The stated purpose was different. The structure was not. Throughout the 2016 game, the Shadow Client is referred to as the Shadow Client by everyone who knows about him: the ICA, the analysts tracking his operations, and the targets themselves. He's a phenomenon, a pattern, a strategic problem. The name 47 coins himself at the end of Bangkok, not something given to Gray by anyone who knew him, just a designation for a shape in the intelligence record that didn't have a face yet. The name Lucas Gray is what he became after escaping the asylum in 1989. It's not a birth name. Subject 6 wasn't born with a name in any conventional sense. Names were not part of what Ortmeyer gave his numbered subjects. Lucas Gray is a name chosen, the way people who build themselves from nothing choose names. Something that fit the person he had decided to become after the institution that made him was no longer able to hold him. He used it in the mercenary world, in the intelligence-adjacent networks where people who don't officially exist find each other, but he kept it completely separate from his Shadow Client operations. The Shadow Client and Lucas Gray are operationally distinct identities, even though they're the same person. Anyone tracking the Shadow Client's activities would find no reliable connection to a name. Anyone who knew Lucas Gray from the mercenary years had no reason to connect him to an anonymous campaign against Providence. In the Colorado ending of the 2016 game, Gray reveals himself, standing outside the compound as 47 walks out, lowering a rifle, saying 2 words. He does not say his name. His identity as Subject 6 is implied by the War Room documents 47 has just found, but the confirmation isn't verbal. The name Lucas Gray doesn't appear on screen in the 2016 game. The first time 47 actually hears the name, in a context where he knows who is speaking and what it means, is in Hitman 2. That moment is where the distance between Subject 6 and Lucas Gray finally collapses. They've been the same person for 30 years. Now there's a name that connects them. Now 47 can say it. Gray waited 3 decades to be known by his chosen name, by the one person whose recognition of it would have meant something. He was patient about most things. He was patient about that, too. The Paris fashion show has 306 confirmed non-crowd NPCs. Each one has a name, a role, and a routine, a specific path through the environment, specific places they stop, specific things they do at specific times. Kitchen staff have shifts, models have rehearsal schedules, security personnel have patrol patterns, guests have conversations they're moving between. None of this is visible to the player in any explicit form. There's no NPC biography screen, but the effects of this design are everywhere. Conversations you overhear that are clearly mid-thread, staff members who react to each other's presence in ways that suggest established history, a sense that the building was doing something before you arrived and will continue doing something after you leave. The AI architecture behind all of it was built for Hitman Absolution and embellished for the 2016 game, a system designed specifically to support NPCs living their lives as expected, with natural daily routines, while simultaneously responding to whatever chaos the player introduces. IO's lead designer, Jason Schroeder, described the challenge of building behavior that feels natural at rest and reactive under pressure, and then running that behavior simultaneously across hundreds of characters without collapsing the frame rate. Christian Elverdum, in retrospective interviews, described Paris and the later Miami mission in Hitman 2 as siblings, both built around the same core idea of a massive public event serving as the stage. Paris was where IO learned what this design philosophy could produce at scale. The scoring system encodes what IO actually values. Non-target kills are penalized. Collateral damage is counted. The game tracks everybody that shouldn't be there. That's not just a mechanical constraint. It reflects something about the character of 47 himself, who is, within his professional framework, not interested in unnecessary deaths. The restraint is scored because IO considered it part of what defines him. The consequence is an environment that feels qualitatively different from a conventional action game. When you're standing in the Palais de Volovska, watching a kitchen worker argue with a security guard about something that has nothing to do with you, the exchange has weight because it comes from a system that assumed it would. IO built Paris as if 306 people had somewhere to be that evening. Most of them did. Oh, and if you're into Assassin's Creed, we've got plenty of videos on it, like this 2 hours of Assassin's Creed Black Flag video that's on your screen right now.